Hello. General greetings. How is everybody doing? It's book club day. Oh, books. Ba 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 ba. We have potentially a slight scuff today because at some point I accidentally clicked one of the mysterious settings, so whenever I type on my keyboard, I get loud synthetic keyboard noises played through my computer systems, and in the joy of Windows 11 I cannot figure out how to turn it off. So if there is like additional typing ASMR at some point in the stream, please just bear with me. I experience technology. But that aside, hello everybody. Hello Dust First Arrival, sweetie. Hello we have Kai lurking, acquiring beverage for the start of the book club shenanigans. But let me do a little introduction. Let me explain what's going on, and all importantly, let me remember to pin the link to the book club and storygraph, which I may have forgotten to do. Let me if you would like to, you can join on Storygraph. There we go. That's an appropriate description. But yeah, so today we will be doing a review discussion and then voting for next month's book club, with the book we're discussing in question being Orlando by Virginia Woolf. Quite a famous book. I generally not Woolf's most acclaimed work, but I would guess one of her most famous. It's the one I heard of first, at least. But I'm quite excited. It's a beautifully written book. The prose is just as purple as I like it, and I'm very invested to discuss it. And some of the varying factors of how it's aged in quite unpleasantly in places, and just the interest of the writing. But book club will be a smidgen shorter than usual today. We'd be having scheduling apologies. We may return to book yap about this in the future to accommodate for this, but now I believe it should be the apt schedule for hologram arrival. This is where I am betrayed, and they don't turn up.
I will never turn up ever again.
Well, that hinders book club, doesn't it? I guess it's a one mouse show. But yeah, I've just finished doing the little introduction shenanigan. Would you like to
Nice.
introduce yourself?
Yes. Introduce myself. I'm Kai.
Mm-hmm.
I like books
Mm-hmm.
and I like D&D. And I'm probably streaming some D&D soon. And yeah.
Yeah.
Yeet. Oh, and I'm redesigning my VTuber thingies.
Yes. Everyone be
Woo.
excited about that. Quite exciting. But yes, shall we hop straight into the book review and discussion?
Hell yeah.
Okay. So, as a like heads up, there's some background noise that's coming through really quite loud from your microphone.
From me?
Yes. Like
I don't even know what's allowed in my area.
it's sounds like packet of crisp opening kind of noise. I don't know.
Oh, it's because I opened a packet of crisps.
Incredible soul read. Okay. Well, you may. I'm really astute at the audio shenanigans. You may
Oh,
have to be agile with the touch to speak then, because it comes through quite loudly on the.
that was crazy.
Okay. So Orlando, before we jump into discussing the book in full, we'll do the classic where we go through a little bit of the about, have we read it before, the author, and also going through the content warnings. Just because it's fun to talk about books, but it's also important to be aware of what's gonna come up. So I'm gonna kind of jump into it straight away, which there is, and I'm gonna list these in two parts because I think there is a contextual and experiential difference for me as a reader, maybe not for all,
Yeah.
for encountering a topic in a story because it is an intended part of the story and it being the author's belief and that coming through in the story. Um, so I'll go through them and then I'll highlight it a little bit further. But some of the main ones are the use of racial slurs, racism, sexism, misogyny, classism, colonialization, general xenophobia. Then there's also mentions of war and death, and infidelity. I think would be
Yeah.
the last. Several people get cheated on, and there's also very brief mention of pregnancy. I believe are the key ones. Um,
Yeah.
yes. The reason why I had a little prelude there is because something which I experience differently is if a subject matter has an upsetting topic or has a belief that is morally unpleasant, then it is
Yeah.
different from experience for me to see a character have and embody that and be combated within the story or be reflected upon versus the author's own beliefs to kind of fall through. And one of the takeaways I had from Orlando is I didn't realize how racist Virginia Woolf was. Um,
Yeah.
and I I'm going to go on a small tangent because it did affect my reading of this. I read the book twice, and the first time I would enjoy the prose. I went into it with this like rosy glasses of there's going to be some things. It's a over 100-year-old book. No, it's an almost 100-year-old book. um, and so it's expected that some things maybe haven't. They don't sit in the way that we would like view them present, and they'll sit
Mm.
even further away than they do in the future as things change, as we improve as a society aspirationally. And but I was going into it and I was just like, I am aware of the progress and the work that Virginia Woolf's written related to feminism, and so you just kind of you assume if someone has one good opinion, they have others, and that's not the case.
Yeah.
um, and
It's
so
very much not the case with this.
yeah, and so the first time I read this book twice, and then I rewatched the Orlando film with Tilda Swinton because
Oh, so
I
good.
love that film, and I love Tilda Swinton. But the first time I read it, my experience was very much falling in love with the prose and then being like, oh dear God, this is so racist, and then like pulling back from the book emotionally, reading a little bit more. A while passes where nothing comes up for it to be handled poorly, and you slowly start to embrace the story and the prose again, and then there's just egregious like racism,
Yep.
xenophobia, just so many weird things, and
Yeah.
that kind of hampered the first experience reading it. I reread it quite quickly this week. I probably read the last two chapters faster than I would have liked because of um, this doesn't have a very to say it doesn't have a direct storytelling style is a little bit disingenuous, but the prose makes it so it's not the kind of clearest read at times, and so
Mm.
I probably would have liked to read the last bit slower to fully digest them. But I
Yeah.
just wanted to reread it, trying to not be grumpy and kind of disquieted. I don't know. I was finding it
Fair.
on my first read through hard to connect with the story because I was just like, I'm very in. I love talking about oak trees, but if I get too invested, I'm gonna get jump scared by just yeah. So I
Yeah.
I had a tumultuous experience reading this, as you may be able to tell. But yes, we're gonna go to our usual book review structure, and now that we've kind of done the content warnings and me rambling with no end about them, to say, have we read anything else by the author? Because I think that can be helpful context. Do you
Mm.
want to answer this first, or I can? I don't mind.
Yeah, I have read more by Virginia Woolf. Um so for one, she has a lot of very influential works in feminism that we talked about, but also I read stuff like Miss Dalloway, A Room of One's Own, To the Lighthouse. I still want to read The Waves,
Mm,
that came out after this. I do still want to read that. and then she has a bunch, but I've read a lot of her like acclaimed books to that capacity, like the big popular ones,
Yeah.
like Jacob's Room, Flush, Night and Day, stuff like that. Um, the Waves is the only not like the only popular one that I have not
Mhm.
read. What about you?
So I have read. This is something that I talk about whenever classics come up, which is I had a period when I was a younger mouse, and I felt like to care about books, I needed to read a bunch of the classics.
Mm,
And without awareness and contemporary understanding of them, I wouldn't be able to participate and appreciate books and media. And so I read a lot of the classics, especially contemporary classics, which I would kind of describe Woolf as one of the
yeah.
key members of. And so I've read a significant portion of her discography, but I read it a while ago. And so
Mm,
within the last 2 years, I've read Kew Gardens, which is a short story by Virginia Woolf, which is
mm,
quite fun. It's only like 30 pages. You can read it in an
yeah, it's
afternoon.
very
It's
short.
it's nice. And I also reread The Voyage Out
Oh
because
yeah.
but I haven't read any of her most renowned work in a long time. So this was actually a reread for me when I first read it this time, but with over a decade in between. Um,
Mm,
so yeah, it was coming in from a slightly strange perspective.
yeah.
The bag of snacks sounds did come from the bag of snacks. I'm still impressed by myself on figuring that out.
I'm
I don't
impressed.
know, Detective Mouse.
I'm impressed by that. You got it right. I
Yeah,
didn't even connect to what actually made the sound, and you're the one that got it right.
I am familiar with the audio scuff. I am champion of this domain.
It's crazy.
um, But yes, I think since this was both a reread for us, our expectations for going into this book may differ from usual because it's not super
Yeah.
often that we're both rereading a book. I think
Mm.
this and The Picture of Dorian Gray have been the only times where we've both been rereading for book club.
Yes, I think so.
Hmm.
Um, which is actually an interesting perspective that we're both rereading this, so our expectations kind of both of us had expectations that we knew about the book going in. Um, I did remember more about how racially insensitive some things in this is, so I wasn't like bamboozled by that part, but it is actually an interesting. I wish I actually did do it like a decade after and I did forget so much of it. Because I reread this 6 years ago? 5 years
Oh,
ago?
hmm.
That's the last time I read it for like I don't even remember for what. Oh, I showed my friend it. I showed my friend some Virginia Woolf and she was like, "You should read it with me." And I was like, "Okay." So I reread it like 5, 6 years ago. Um, so I do remember that stuff, but I kind of wish I got like removed from it for longer because I would think even though you do, from your perspective, it does feel like that reread if you forget about how racially insensitive she is rough.
Yeah. the Going into the book, it had been a long time since I read it. I'd kind of forgotten the degree of racism within it. But the other thing which I
Mm,
hadn't really this is I had vague memories which were mostly broad strokes about Orlando's character, and it was kind of
mm,
nice reading this book when you're older than
mm,
Orlando in the first like 3 acts, if that makes sense.
yeah,
Because when I first read Orlando, um, I was just like, no, of course his poetry is great and he's making wise and good decisions as like a 17-year-old boy, unquestionably so. Surely this is the time where you're wisest in life. And so it was kind of nice to read that bit and be like, oh no, he maybe his poetry
yeah,
wasn't very good at that time. Um, and so that bit was kind of different from expectations. Um,
yeah.
the other thing which I will say is I found going back and forth on this. The first time I read it in quite hmm, a less of a magical realism way than it's intended. So I I remember I read this with like accompanied by a textbook when I first read it, and so there was the discussion of like inherited perspective, and especially within the upper class, and how there's a few characters who are referenced as continuing and reoccurring as if they were the same individual over the course of hundreds of years, similar to Orlando. And so it was quite interesting reading through from a more magical realism lens, and just yes, this is just a 300-year-old, 30-year-old woman, um, rather than it being a kind of metaphor, or not even a metaphor, but a telling about inherited pattern and tradition, especially within those for whom inheritance is more significant in the upper class, which most of the story follows. So that was kind of interesting. Just trying to approach it from within the logic of the world rather than as an allegory for something was
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, is there any cool print stuff about how you read this book slash how did you read it digitally, physically, or audiobook? So I read this physically, and I read this on an old copy that I got from a charity shop that is so old it doesn't have an
Oh.
ISBN number. Um,
Oh God.
yeah,
Nice.
you have to be careful when you open the book because the front and the back page are like falling off. It's a very
Oh
old,
God.
like pressed perfect bind. If bookbinding shenanigans. Um,
Hmm.
I posted a few photos on my Twitter and Blue Sky a while back. I can grab the link to the post. I think you can see Blue Sky posts without an account. That one's probably best.
I
Um,
think so.
But yes, so I read a like a delightfully old version, but also one which
Quite
I
cool.
forgot about my Enfield toggle. This is what I get for using the copy and paste key binding correctly. Wait, did you not have Steam open? You just opened it to see.
I did just open stream to see.
Nice. But yeah, so I read it physically. I will say I did also read it digitally at times, because I just didn't want to bring the book I had like out and about in my bag because I thought it might get damaged. So
Yeah.
this book is in the public domain, and so I did read some of it on like Project Gutenberg, just on the digital version.
Hmm.
As always, having physical books can be wonderful, especially because the permanent control over media. But for classics, especially classics of this age, you can access them legally and free online, and there are many incredible sources of which to do so. Some of which have like additional information and context. So cool things like that. Woo. Um, but yes.
Yeah.
How did
I
you read it?
So in that same vein, I have a very old copy of this book at home that I didn't use to read it. Mostly because I was traveling a lot this week. I was a lot of different places. I didn't want to take it outside, so I read it digitally. Um, Again, available through the Gutenberg and through a lot of sources because this is a classic book and it's public domain and you can find this anywhere. Please do that if you do want to read this book and don't want to go buy it or library it. But yeah, this is publicly available, and that's how I read it. I think we actually read the exact same one because yes, I also used the Gutenberg.
I will
Um,
say, having digitized books is a blessing, but also, dear goodness, you can embed chapters to PDF to like PDF formats. Why can you not have searchable chapters? I yeah,
yeah, yeah, yeah.
technology
It's a
has moved
blessing, but
forwards.
oh,
Please, I'll volunteer to do it
yeah,
for any book that I access. Let me let me improve the quality of
yeah.
life. But yes, so
It is
um,
really painful.
yeah. My Notion hasn't crashed, it was just sulking. Um, but yes, uh, I believe in terms of translations or revisions, this isn't a translation. It was originally published in English. There's been translated to many other languages. I believe there are some revised versions that omit some of the slurs, but
Mm.
the printed versions I had is one of the older ones that still has them there. So Yeah, I believe there's some versions that
Oh,
avoid it.
yeah.
But I also, curiously, ended up with one that was printed originally in the US of A, only for sale and purchase there. So how it ended up back over here is quite impressive.
How did that happen?
I don't know. um, but yeah. Um,
That's kind of interesting.
yeah. Okay, so should we? We've kind of gone over a little bit about the content warnings and how some of them exist outside the
Mm.
story within the author's own perspective. Um, world building is a strange topic. Oh, we should talk about first. Normally, when we have a story based book as opposed to an informative book or essay collection, we tend to do a spoiler free and a spoiler review, so that if you wish
Yeah.
to engage with and read the text, then you can do so without encountering the main plot points. And
Mm.
Orlando has a plot and has events that develop, and it is like a biography of life in a sense. But I feel like maybe this is just kind of naive convenience, especially because we're running with a shorter stream format today. But the experience of reading it is the value isn't really too much attached to the plot points,
Mm-mm.
excluding the kind of key point that's in the blurb of Orlando one day no longer being a man and now being a woman.
Mm.
Same person, different sex. And so we're going to be reviewing it in one whole piece. And so normally we do have the spoiler free section. That is not the case today. Yeah. Just as a little clarification, this is
Mm.
kind of a vibes based decision. Um, if you have strong opinions, please let us know.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We we felt it might be better to do this one as one, mostly because it would feel weird splitting some of this up, which would make it a little bit harder. So like we thought it might be a good one to do, but like if you do have any other thoughts about it, please do let us know. I
Formats in
do think this
development.
one,
Oh, yeah.
yeah, I think this is one of the rare story ones that would be like this though. Often with like it felt weird doing it with Oscar Wilde to a degree because like we did do
Yeah.
a split for that one, and it felt weird because so much of that book was not about the story. It
Yeah.
was a lot
It's
about like
also like,
around it.
spoiler, guess what happens at the end of the picture of Dorian Gray?
Yeah, it's like
Yeah.
uh, so it felt weird to split it up, and that's kind of why I leaned this way on this one too, is because like I felt like it was so weird in Dorian Gray where you're like, oh yes, I cannot spoil Dorian Gray, one of the most well-known and referenced stories uh, ever.
Yeah.
So like it just felt a little bit interesting to do it that capacity. So
We're kind of
but
leaning for non-fiction like fiction to just always do a full review.
mm,
Potentially, if we read some more modern literary fiction, um, there could be an argument to do it in the two halves. But again, feel free to have opinions and let us know. I like hearing people's opinions about books and book review formats. Oh, hello, Bun. Are the potatoes working? I didn't actually notice. Um,
that's all. I'll already my potato.
wait, I can't see the toggle. 1 second. The potato again, potato again.
My potato again. I think it might be broken.
I'm potatoless. Wait a minute.
I think potato might be broken.
Potato, potato, potato. Okay. My debts are settled. Continuing onwards. The the we tend to kind of honestly struggle a little bit with adapting the general format for reviewing science fiction and fantasy books to classics in literary fiction. So historically, we would talk about the style of writing, the characters, the world building, and the themes and kind of sentiments and takeaways. I feel like world building, although there are some incredibly beautiful atmospheric descriptions of the surrounding place, it's very secondary, very logically inconsistent. Extremely so. If you try and
Yeah.
kind of world building science your way out of this book, you will end up stuck somewhere in the Elizabethan era.
Yeah.
But we can talk a little bit about the different key locations, because
Yeah.
in my mind
That might be
there
helpful.
are 6 key locations, which, wait, let me count again. So, first location is under the oak tree. Second location is Orlando's house. Third location is the frozen river. Fourth location is the abstract and moving place of high society London. And then fifth location would be Constantinople, as I believe, is that the location where Orlando was
Yeah.
his ambassador? I've actually forgotten
Yeah.
that. Yeah, Constantinople. Um, did I say 6? I meant 5. Wait, have I forgotten one?
Think I think those are the main ones.
I think they're the 5, yeah, because
Yeah.
there are some repeated locations, others not, but they all fall into one of a few behavioral patterns in terms of what they are used for and what they represent as a backdrop within the story, with the most returned naturally being the house, but equally being the oak tree. Um, which I got very invested in, like, oak tree spotting early on. I think it was the memory of when I first read the book. The second time the word oak got mentioned, I was like, there's a theme here. And then I was just there for the oak tree, which it's always curious. Oak trees historically have so much connection to life, specifically long life, with many interpretations of Isdursil, the Great World Tree, being an oak tree, and yeah, it, I was team oak tree. But in terms of the actual world building in how the environment kind of shaped and acted on the story, I feel like it didn't. It was mostly there as shorthand, or to be used as a thing in the background that would describe feelings and associations of which are going to occur in the following scene,
Yeah.
rather than as a kind of pivotal environmental change. I suppose with the exception
Yeah.
of being Constantinople and the
Yeah. That's a big one.
the
Yeah.
revolution. I don't know, it's kind of vague in the book, and its
Yeah.
accuracies to history are temperamental at best. Oh, that's something which I thought was quite interesting. Sorry, talking about location, because the one which was most compellingly written for me as a location um, was the frozen river at the very start of the
Oh.
book.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
something which I found quite interesting is when I first read the book when I was a small mouse back in the day. Oh wait, hi Sona, how are you doing? I hope you're having a good day. Um, is that I knew that the Thames had frozen, and so I took, as it was described in the book, as kind of fact. I was just like, oh, maybe this is a bit dramatic, but wow, the Thames used to be a lot smaller. I didn't think it could freeze all the way through, but I guess it did. But that's really not the case. That, like, there was certainly people who went out on the Thames, and there was to some degree a festival there, but it wasn't frozen to the bottom. I think it's described as being frozen 20 fathoms down at one point, which was never the case. And so
Yeah.
it's one of those things which it wasn't immediately obvious when I first read it, and maybe that was like the naivety of youth, just reading something and going, "It's in a book, it must be true." But I found it quite fun how even in the establishing information, the biography, the kind of presented factual format is giving the reader information which you know not to be true as a starting precedent. I liked it.
I like it too.
I'm glad I had the extra context for it this time because I was just going to believe them. It was so beautifully written. Um,
Yeah, just believe it. Just
it might be
believe
true.
anything you read.
Oh no.
Yeah, she said it, so it must be true, right?
Well, um, but yeah, regarding the how do we talk about?
Mm.
I feel like I don't have much to say about the locations other than I think the house is interesting, but
Mm.
it's interesting in the less fun reading of this book, which is
Mm.
at least by my experience, which is if you read this as a story about inheritance and expectation and family in some kind of desperation to not read it as a book about being trans and gender identity, then the house can be seen as an extension of that, like passed down self and standard and expectation. And so,
Yeah.
because I don't find that kind of lens particularly compelling, I think the house is interesting as a tool of depicting change, but
Yeah. Okay.
I don't know. Normally, the settings for a book have and build to some great emotional significance, but other than just
Mm.
the beauty with which the frozen river was described and the kind of I was gonna start talking about themes, but I'm trying so desperately to stay within world building when it's not a vast amount. But
There's not that much to the world building.
but yeah, I also thought it was quite interesting if we're going to talk about the house, how Orlando prior to Constantinople, when it was Orlando the man versus Orlando the woman, perceived and interacted
Mm.
with the house. Um,
Mm.
as a like little note, generally, it the practice that is within the book and that I've observed when talking about it is the first part to talk about Orlando as a man, for second part talk about Orlando as a woman. If this is read as like a trans allegory, that then don't don't like deadpan people. Don't just be like, oh, back when
Yeah.
they were a man. This is within the literary context. This is not the practice.
Yeah.
Please don't do that. This, yeah.
Yeah.
Anyway, I was just like,
Don't do
I
that.
feel the need to communicate this. It feels kind of like silly for anyone who is choosing to read this book in this year to clarify too, but sometimes it needs to be said. But yes, but the way the Orlando in the first part of the book when he was younger, when how he interacted with the house was really quite different. And I found it interesting. It was something which I really hadn't picked up the first time I read the book, how childish Orlando is in the first half. Um and even to some extent after the transformation as acknowledged by the biographer. Um
Hmm.
but yeah. I suppose if we're talking about
Yeah.
world building in an abstract sense, more so than location, the world building would be within this book would be the framing of information and the fact that we have a present and participating biographer as part of the conversation in the story. Um,
Yeah.
which I don't read a huge amount of biographies, but was like quite atypical to me from what I expected. It wasn't
Yeah.
it wasn't a part of the story I remembered, but it was quite curious. Um, since Well, there was some beautiful parts. There was one early on which I wrote down on. That's not my book notes. Where's my book notes? Here they are. Um, which was a quote regarding a period of life where there wasn't too much information about Orlando. Um, I'm just gonna. I think it's at the start of chapter 2, so I'm just gonna scroll to the page in my book. Um, ba 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 ba. Up to this point, in telling the story of Orlando's life, documents both private and historical have made it possible to fulfill the first duty of a biographer, which is to plod, without looking to right or to the left, in indelible footprints of truth, and then cited by flowers, regardless of shade, on and on methodically till we fall plump into the grave and write finis on the tombstone above our heads. But now we come to an episode which lies right across our path, so that there is no ignoring it, yet it is dark, mysterious, and undocumented, so that there is no explaining it. Volumes may be written in interpretation of it, whole religious systems founded upon the significance of it. Our simple duty is to state the facts as far as they were known, and let the reader make of them what he may.
Hmm.
Is interesting. I was gonna go on a separate tangent there, but first of all, beautiful writing. I like purple prose. Um, I'm gonna just be saying positive things about the writing style when we get to it, but
Hmm.
the position of the biographer as a character within the story but separate from it was interesting to me. It's not something I've encountered much. It's not something I really appreciated the abnormality of when I first read the book. Um,
Hmm.
uh, um, um, there was once again background noises coming from your end quite loudly. um,
Back. What the hell is background noise triggering on my side?
I don't know. I know you're on the go, so maybe it's just like scuff microphone
Is it my
things.
keyboard?
It might be your keyboard, but it is as loud as your voice. So, uh, at least on the microphone.
Weird.
But yeah, did you have any like particular notes, or how did you find the position of the biographer within the book as a character? Um,
Okay, so we were talking about some like the capacity of it as a like for world building specifically, right?
yeah.
Because like I agree that world building in that classic sense doesn't really work for this book
Mhm.
in a lot of ways. It's not really not made it's not made in that capacity. Um, but the thing you said that I agree with heavily is the whole idea of the how do I say it? I'm trying to think of your exact wording, but how the control of information almost functions like world building in this capacity. Um, how what you know and where you know and like how the world gets shown to you when kind of functions like it, and I like that idea. I didn't think of it like that, but I like that idea of
Oh?
how
Oh, sorry. I thought that was an indignant, not a thinking noise.
no, I yeah, I like the idea because like in classic world building often you would lock stuff up behind not knowing it so that you can reveal it when it becomes like part of the world. So like you would lock down like until they have their first magic fight, you don't drop an exposition of like, ah yes, and we live in a world of magic where this and this and this can happen, right? You do it the first time they get into a magic fight, and then you're like, ah yes, they can control metal with their like this one controls iron, they can push it like that.
I see you've
Um,
also been getting excited for the Avatar The Last Airbender. Sorry.
I want to see that movie. Um, I do want to see that movie
I'm
really
just
badly.
excited
You're
about all
right.
the Zuko fan art, I'm going to be honest, but here we are. Um,
What the? What the? Nah, nah.
Viola?
You gotta at least
No?
be. You have to, you have to at least be excited for Aang.
I'm excited for the film. I am very pleasantly surprised with the amount of people drawing fan art on my timeline. Well done, everyone. Keep up the good work.
There's a lot of fan art, but yeah. So like, it's usually like, and in that capacity, like our narrator to a degree, or like whose perspective we follow, kind of functions like world building, which
Mhm.
is really interesting, and I really like it. I kind of, I kind of want more books to function like that because I think it works very well. But yeah, I really like it, especially in this capacity where there is a lack of like other sources of world building, if you understand what I mean. Like
Yeah.
there's no Pernesi which like tells you about the mansion they live in, or like something like that, where there's other sources of world building. This kind of has that as its main source, and it works so well.
Well, what I found quite curious is it makes sense within the like degree of which someone of Orlando's status and class and historical significance is documented and how extensively they wrote throughout their life. But
Mm,
the fact that it swaps at times from this established observer with quite a clear satirical tone to there's times when you're reading where it almost feels like the usual kind of most modern literature is written with a limited third person perspective when you are assigned a series of characters to follow and you have the information of those characters and you read and discover information alongside them or when it reoccurs to be significant to them. And so it kind of there were times when reading where it could almost feel like you were stepping back into that classical of that I don't know if classical is the right word. I think it was still common at the time, but that default third person limited perspective, but then you get pulled back to this defined observer quite satirical perspective because this is a satirical novel to more
yeah.
extent than I realized the first time I read it. That was like one of the big switcheroos for me. And
Mm,
so I think it's interesting where the narrator and I'm using like the biographer and the narrator
yeah.
synonymously, which I don't know if that's helpful in this case, but I found it quite interesting where the biographer chose to interrupt because the use of brackets to supplement information in this book is quite uncommon in how much it happens. Um, Having a sentence where something is described and then brackets additional information and context is to be given is generally quite an informal style of writing. And when if you look at the language used, the purple prose, especially when this book was written in 1928, I think
Mm,
it was published in 1929, in the 1920s, and it was using language which for the time was still older. Um,
mm,
that's a very informal and disruptive way of writing. And so I found it quite interesting. It was something that I didn't notice as much towards the end of the book, potentially just because momentum overtook me. But I found it very curious at the start, seeing where, often describing young Orlando's flow of emotions, the brackets would be there almost to split up and remove tempo and pacing and pull the reader back from the flow of Orlando's thought. Um, and then also the times normally at the beginning of chapters or I forgot the name of it. Subsections within the chapter where there would be
oh
a
yeah,
direct address of the certainty of the information or how this isn't a wider religious statement kind of introductions.
yeah.
I found those pauses quite interesting for how they affected the flow of the book because if you look at this the, I just thought it was interesting because it's not something you would expect from within the book if its premise was described to you outright. And it's
Yeah.
not something which is fundamentally necessary to the points communicated within the story. And it's kind of needed to facilitate the satirical level to it, I feel like.
Mm,
I'm not the best at picking up on satire in books, especially older books. I tend to just be like, I guess that was just the language at the time. And so um, the amount of times I'm reading like Jane Austen and one character reacts with offense to something and I'm like, oh wait, was that an insult? Holy moly, I just thought that was a sincere remark on the quality of your shoes. But but I just think it's quite interesting in how it splits up the flow of the narrative in places and it
yeah.
injects humor into the book because there's humor there regardless, but I feel like it might not be so clearly telegraphed without the narrator slash biographer's interruptions. Um, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely, it wouldn't be.
Do you have any thoughts relating?
To what specifically?
To the use and the place of narrator and where they
Oh,
interrupted the
yeah,
flow
yeah,
of
yeah.
the book, to the satire, the humor, any bits really. It's open ended. um,
Yeah, honestly, I enjoyed the choices of it, and honestly, that's something that I kind of looked at more the second time, the third time. Yeah, it's the third time.
mhm,
I tried to think if is this the third time I've read this book now? Like this is my second reread, I think.
yeah.
Um, so it is very interesting on like this read of it, um, to like see where it got chosen to do that, which was very interesting to see. Um, and I kind of wish that it makes me wish more books do it to the capacity, where I can, to a degree, it's like the narrator becomes a character
Mhm.
in the book. Um, and the only thing that I could use as reference for it to make people understand what I'm talking about is like it feels very much like the Rocky Horror Picture Show or something like that, where the narrator is a physical character in the show. Um, for those that don't know, the narrator in Rocky Horror Picture Show is on stage the whole time with them and actually functions as like an in-world character that is telling the story, but is also physically there on stage with them. You also see it in a bunch of other plays. The Rocky Horror Picture Show is just the one that came to mind first because it's got
Gender.
yes, but also it has
Oh,
what's his name?
I'm gonna have to be more specific.
Tim Curry. It has Tim Curry in it, who I love.
Ah,
It has the goat, Tim Curry. Um, the goat. But yeah, so it kind of makes me wish for more stories and stuff that use it, but also in this capacity that she uses it, where she interrupts the story, for what reason, with what she interrupts the story. Because like, yeah, it's a very interesting idea. Um,
yeah.
there's also a
Oh,
large capacity in it of that I enjoyed at least of what's the way to say it? Because of how the so we talked a bit about it earlier, right? Where often you get information that is like not you get information that is wrong. Um,
mhm.
you get like very not correct information at the best way to say that is like misinformed information from so it also colors the idea of like the interruptions and of the story being told in like what capacity is this even the right version of events that is getting told by the narrator to us, and why are they interrupting at points, and why are they like what is the like storytelling device behind some of this of is this also just wrong information I'm getting given, you know what I mean?
Yeah. It yeah. It it's curious in a few
Yellow
places.
notes.
Oh, that joke. Why did the mustard wake up with the ketchup? It couldn't ketchup emotionally. I like tomato ketchup. Tomato ketchup's such a good condiment. Also, hello, yellow. um, but yeah,
That is hilarious.
structurally the book's quite interesting because we're talking less about
Mm,
world building as we normally would in the establishment of themes and geographical places and internal logical consistencies, and more so as tools and structure regarding how the story is communicated to you.
mm,
And something which is quite interesting is the passage of time. Um,
mm,
and there's a section at the start of the book that I seemingly did not have a tab on, and I'm now going to have to search digitally because I cannot flick through pages quickly in a copy this old without being irresponsible.
Yeah. Yeah, that would be scary.
Uh,
I would not risk it.
yeah,
Hmm.
I'm
Hmm.
struggling to find the point.
Hmm.
Okay, I'm going to explain the point which I'd like to talk about, and then I'll grab the quote to support it, which is I
Yeah.
found the passage of time, where it was detailed and where it wasn't, quite interesting for a few reasons. And I think that there's a framing quote towards the start of the book which really it really kind of solidified the view.
Soliditated.
This is what I get for searching and reading all time to speak. It really solidified the framing of why Orlando was 300 years old, yet also in her 30s when the book ended.
Hmm.
Uh,
I want to make that a new word now, by the way.
Solidified? No.
We need to make soliditated a thing.
No. Um. Hmm. Uh. Okay, I found the quote. It's a little bit of a longer one, but there's this
Hmm.
idea presented throughout the early on within the book, I believe in chapter 2, where time as a varying thing exists. And
Hmm.
this at this point in the book, it isn't exceedingly clear that Orlando is living longer and aging differently than those you would expect in a kind of
Yeah.
in a book in this setting. And so this is a little quote which, on my second reread for this book club, really shaped my perspective of Orlando's long life and the passage of time and focus on it, which is uh, where's the starting point? I support how long the sentences in this book are.
Yeah.
Flat statement. Me too. Um, but okay, here we go. He saw the beech trees turn golden, the young ferns unfurl. He saw the moon sickle and then circular. He saw, but probably the reader can imagine, the passage which should follow, and how every tree and plant in the neighbourhood is described first green, then golden. How moonrise and sunsets, how spring follows winter and autumn and summer. How night succeeds day and day night, how there is first a storm and then fine weather, how things remain as much they are for 200 or 300 years or so, except for a little dust and a few cobwebs, which one old woman can sweep up in half an hour, a conclusion which, one cannot help feeling, might have been reached more quickly by a simple statement that time passed. Here the exact amount could be indicated in brackets, which is in brackets, the exact amount is not indicated, and nothing whatever happened. But time, unfortunately, though it makes animals and vegetables bloom and fade with amazing punctuality, has no such simple effect upon the mind of man. The mind of man, moreover, works in equal strangeness upon body and time. An hour, once it lodges in the queer element of the human spirit, may be stretched to 50 or 100 times its clock length. On the other hand, an hour may be accurately represented on the timepiece of the mind by 1 second. Extraordinary discrepancy between time and the clock and time in the mind is less known than it should be, and deserves fuller investigation. Which to me, I feel like this kind of is interesting as a framing of, we only get these certain updates at different points throughout Orlando's long life where we can assume pivotal or significant things happen, and something which it's not really, when people discuss Orlando as a book, this idea of Orlando as a mortal is kind of spoken about in passing, and if you take the 1992 film, for example, the idea that Orlando hasn't aged at all isn't quite how it appears in the original text. It implicitly says like 15, mid-20s, and 35, I believe, are the three ages that are called out.
Yeah.
And so I feel like there's some fun connection, not with the idea that Orlando isn't aging, but especially later on when you get to the start of the 20th century, when Orlando's generally quite put out about it, the year changing and it no longer being 1899 anymore. The idea of how much Orlando changes and develops is mirrored by how much they age rather than the passage of time.
Yeah.
I found that quite interesting. That was like the lens with which I read Orlando's immortality here, because it's kind of curious. It makes for a very interesting story with a lot of beautiful locations, but in a strange way, the story doesn't. The immortality is almost, well, the extended life is almost used as a first stepping stone to suspend logic from Orlando's normal life and setting within the world, especially so that later transformation is kind of par for the course.
Yeah.
Because it's not especially central. The main thing which the extended life and story span is used for is to remark on poets being annoying.
Yeah. Which is hilarious, by the way.
Yeah. Virginia Woolf has some strong opinions on various poets and was not. Yeah. Why are you calling it tomato ketchup? Is there another type of ketchup? Is there another type of ketchup?
Yeah, there's a bunch of types of ketchups. Ketchup isn't a like tomato-based thing. You can do a bunch of different ketchups. There's banana ketchups.
I need to acquire banana ketchup.
Mm.
I'm not quite pleased about that discovery. Okay, I'll get back to you all how I feel about that. But yeah, the passage of time.
Yeah, it can get a lot.
The
I didn't know you didn't know.
I've only ever encountered tomato ketchup before.
It's like it's the same as like chutneys. You can do a bunch of different types of chutney.
I suppose so. Oh
But yeah,
yes. But yeah, it's quite interesting because I'm jumping into themes a little bit. But if you look at the events throughout Orlando's life, you have the the time before Sasha, the time with Sasha, the time recovering from and encountering poets, the brief home renovation arc, the trip to Constantinople, the second trip when returning to England now as a woman, and then the trying not to date, trying to reject a man for this segment.
yeah,
That was the least interesting segment to me, gonna be honest. And then there's the like concluding chapters with Shell, and then finally publishing the Oak Tree.
yeah.
When you look at where this time is allotted and the like significance of each of these moments, I think there's the fun contrast of in less. I think it's in a paragraph and never referenced again. Orlando does have a child in this book, um, and so I think it's quite interesting the way time and space on the page, and then under the like general social assumption of what a biography is for, significance is allotted to things. And I think the it's very intentional, specifically with the brief address of pregnancy, how when Orlando becomes a woman and first has a slightly naive view and then learns to understand the kind of consequences and her position and acceptance and the discussions with Shell, which well, honestly, the part of the book which I was most confused by, but we'll get to that later on the character segment. But I
Mm,
think it's interesting, although like I I had a very set understanding of why it was the case of why the depiction of pregnancy and birth was so minimized was the idea of when describing the life of a woman, Woolf wanted to minimize that and have that not be a significant part. And so to include it but without giving it weight kind of signifies, as Orlando's experience of discovering being a woman, that reproduction and birth is not the defining or significant factor of being a woman,
mm.
was my interpretation of it, because
Yeah.
it doesn't appear anywhere else in the story. There's a line earlier on that unless Orlando has a son, then she'll lose access to her estates because um uh England in in
Yeah.
in the 19th
England.
century. um yeah.
Just England.
um but yeah, I yeah, there's a few sections which if we look at the book kind of structurally, I will say the home renovation arc feels a little detached from the rest of the story.
It does.
And it was pleasant to read, it was engaging to read, but when I look at the whole thematically, outside of establishing Orlando's naivety at that point and having space on page with strong emotions that allow him to recover from Green, I didn't see how it significantly connected later on, other than being used as a tool to communicate the passage of time in part, that some of the things later needed repairing, despite all being done up. Um,
Mm.
but yeah, I wondered, was there a connection you found to that part later on, or were you also confused by the
Well,
home renovation?
I okay. So you talked about two that you did not like, two sections that you did not. Well, not
Well,
that you didn't like, but like. So you talked about just to. So you got to the section about the man, like rejecting a man, which was like
yeah,
that section, and then the home renovation section were to me two dolls in the story, like two lulls in the story for this.
yeah,
I did not find a connection elsewhere, but that's not to say I enjoyed it. I
hmm
like it. It's fun. Um,
yeah.
but
Like
like yeah,
I,
I
I love
didn't
the
find
on-page
anything
writing
more
of
about
this book, and so I'm gonna be happy to read sentences written by Virginia Woolf. But
yeah,
yeah, I will say for the section on rejecting a man, that's very shorthand. It's used in part to describe Orlando's experience of now being a woman and how that affects her
and
place in the
getting
world.
courted.
And it,
Yeah,
it, it makes sense why you have to start with some really dumb opinions about womanhood and then progress from there. But I was just not
yeah,
particularly compelled, especially because on first reread, um, I found this section kind of almost irksome, because I was just sitting there just being like, no, narrator, I don't want to sit and laugh with you about how naive this view is and how silly they are and their lack of understanding of feminism and women's experience when you were being racist on the last page. Like, no, I don't trust you as a perspective to laugh with about how naive they
yeah,
are and their lack of understanding of how this biases affect their lived experiences. Like, because that's one of the
yeah,
places where the kind of not condescension to Orlando, but the perspective of this young figure, several hundred years old, still has yet to understand this, and we, the reader and the narrator, will sit together and observe and kindly see their development. I was just kind of grumpy, and I was just like, I don't feel a kinship with the narrator, and so I struggled a little bit with what I think could otherwise be the natural experience of congratulations, 2 plus 2 is 4. These are these are the building blocks you've got there. Um, but
yeah,
the tone and the framing and wanting to laugh with the narrator, I couldn't do. Um, and so
yeah,
the parts where it was just generally satirical and mocking the British upper class, those bits I could get behind. But when it was just oh, look at these people with their lack of understanding of values and their discrimination, and I was like,
yeah.
I'm not gonna be sitting there and
Mm.
laughing with you on this one. And so that's kind of why I felt disconnected from that chapter. I think, although not like particularly timely, given that it's now almost 100 years later, there are interesting and certainly at the time insightful comments about the lived experience and the expectation of women and the enforcement of the socialization of gender and behavior. But the kind of insider tone contrasted with the just the racism. There's like layers of bad things, but the racism's really bad.
The racism is really bad.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it made it difficult to be conspiratorial with the narrator for me, and so I felt very detached from that chapter where I think that tone and framing was most present.
yeah, but it's not just like conspiratorial with it's very like French joking around with friends type vibe. And yeah, I did not enjoy it at all in that capacity. When yeah, it's hard because like some of it is like I get some of it, right? Like
Mhm.
what she was trying to do, and like the idea, and like I I still really like her as an author, but like, and it is definitely a tone thing where it's like not tone thing, time thing. I don't know why I said tone. It's a time thing where at the time or even like less removed from the time and stuff, it would be a lot better in a lot of capacities, but it just doesn't. Like, it
Yeah,
feels weird.
I
It
feel
feels weird.
it's one of those things because it's something that's not often discussed when talking about this book because it does such a incredible job talking about women's experience and the like lack of the fragile understanding of gender that's often normalized. And so
Hmm.
I think in the desire to kind of hold it up as an incredible depiction of that, people just people just kind of go and of its time, and it's like that's fair. It's an incredible book. I love the prose. It does a great job describing and kind of nullifying the depiction of the like certainty of gender by birth. And so I'm just kind of I can't fully separate it, and especially
Hmm.
when the book wants me to kind of agree with it, to like wink wink nudge nudge, um and be framed in like allyship and all agreement. I, I
Yeah.
there's really quite a lot of racism. There's so
Yeah, there really is.
there's multiple instances. Yeah, I'm just caught up on it. Um, it this is yeah.
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 Hmm.
But anyway,
It is.
I I'll just be sitting there just being like, this is why I get grumpy reading classics, because I'm like, oh, that was a beautifully constructed sentence. Oh, and there's a slur. And it's not a pleasant reading experience for me.
It's not.
Um, and
It's
and
not.
other people can look past it, but I struggle to like engage with faith with the author when things like that happen, or especially keep happening. Um, and so yeah, I'm trying to not have the whole book club review just being like, it was nice until the book was racist. Um, and it starts out, yeah. Anyway, um, yeah. One thing which
Yeah.
the section which I found potentially hardest to follow is I think Woolf's often described as quite an intimidating author. Um,
Yeah.
I this was at least the impression that I've always had surrounding her. Which is structurally the story was generally quite easy to follow in terms of key events. However, there was the section where Orlando gets meets Shell, breaks their ankle, and then gets married.
Hmm.
Or in a slightly different order. But that was the part which I had the least certainty about how not the events that occurred I was familiar with, but the framing of the events in the conversation, that was the point where I felt the least confident in my connection with the author's intention, if that makes
Yeah.
sense. Because
Yeah.
we talked a little bit about how in the previous chapter Orlando is returning to England after having recently became a woman and is experiencing how people treat her differently because she's wearing her skirt, and how her ankles are now a hazardous weapon that will knock men out, which is quite foolish for them. And there's all these kind of like elementary observations, but it's quite clear when reading, or I found it quite clear, tonally, the perspective the Woolf wanted you to have. But for the section with Shell, and I'll be addressing them as Shell because I cannot remember the full name.
Yeah.
Oh, what would be the best way to find Marmaduke
A
Bombfrost
description from
Shelmadine,
somebody.
Orlando's husband. There's a degree of satire and sincerity surrounding this that I found a little bit difficult to pass. Not so much of like the actual events, but the intended framing of it, because there is humor in the address of they'd known each other 3 seconds, but they knew everything about each other, and the like a few minutes later they became engaged, because their first introduction is, "Madam," the man cried, leaping to the ground, "you're hurt." "I'm dead, sir," she replied. A few minutes later they became engaged. This is like quite a satirical framing, but then when it
Yeah.
goes on to discuss their connection, their communication, it's addressed very sincerely. And there's the kind of the back and forth discussing Shell's gender almost, where there's "You're a woman, Shell," she cried. "You're a man, Orlando," he cried. Never was there such a presentation and demonstration as then took place the world began. And you kind of break down of the suggestion that it was previously stated that Orlando could only ever love women, but then has this sincere adoration and love, brackets, the satirical framing at the start, with Shell. But I don't know. I felt like this was one of the cases where there was many ideas being had and I didn't pass all of them, because there are moments where like things of unique and sincere adoration are presented with the idea of communication that goes simply beyond words, and there is like quite sincere affection between them, but then there's also times where it's just framed so satirically and reductively that I don't know, I felt like I was missing something with how it was intended to be presented. And when I first read this book as a small mouse, I was just like, "Yep, that's Orlando's bird." that was that was little baby me's interpretation. I was like, I guess she just needed a husband and she found one. Fair enough. He's off in the ocean doing campaigning in America. I don't know. I forgot the context of it. Cape Horn.
Yeah.
And so I was just like, "Oh, that's her bird. He's going to be away in the ocean captaining a ship. That's logistically convenient." But she needed a husband legally. And so this was kind of the framing that I had going into the book, because I was kind of caught up and I was just like, "Oh, can't wait for Orlando to get a girlfriend. She still loves women." And then she got a husband. But there's the kind of address which suggests that the reason why Orlando is attracted to and then in love with Shell is because despite being a man, he contains feminine traits, and there's through that a further breakdown of like the binary notion of gender and how deterministic it is for a trait to be solely masculine or feminine. And that's interesting, but I was excited for Orlando to get a girlfriend. I was just like, wait, I remember, yeah, I don't know. I feel like I just didn't fully pass all of it. I feel like there's some layer intended with Shelmadine that I need to read the book a fourth time, or maybe some time to be grumpy and then try to read it again. But yeah, it's curious.
That is really funny though.
The solemnly
That's just the
teenage mouse was just like, "Oh, yep, Orlando needs a bird. Time Book Rankle and found one. Let's go. Like yeah,
That's so funny.
yeah. It made sense to me at the time. Okay. Um, I I was reading this book for the first time as like little baby mouse, really rooting for Orlando getting a girlfriend. I was so excited for her. I was like, it didn't work. I was like, maybe she's gonna meet Sasha as an old woman, and we're just gonna ignore the 300 years have passed, and they're gonna date again. But no. Um, um, but yeah, I
That is like, oh god.
I feel like I've dealt you emotional damage with the.
No, it's just really funny. I never saw it like that, but it's hilarious if you look at it from that capacity.
It's not how I read it now, but when I first read the book, that was kind of how I approached it, because I took the
Oh,
first
it's so
declaration of
good.
Orlando still only being interested in women, like quite sincerely. Um, yeah, I will say that I'm gonna sound a little bit silly here, especially with
Yeah.
older books, when they kind of want to be a bit coy and they didn't want to like clearly state, and then these two characters had sex and it fades to black. There are times in this book when I was
Yeah.
just like, I can't tell what is inferred to have happened after this time skip. And I feel like because when I was just like, oh, that's an entanglement to have with the elderly queen. Maybe is my mind in the gutter? It rarely is, so that would be surprising. And then um there was like with Shell the more certain due to Orlando having a child, and then the little arc where Orlando goes with, from my reading, the intention of romantically pursuing I've forgotten her name, but the beautiful
Hmm.
girl she sees sitting on a bench who is inferred to be a sex worker, and then they just dramatically at some point declares, "Oh no, I'm a woman," and then they just kind of have like a little gossip, and there's like a nice little section discussing the kind of companionship and connection of women, and then a man
Hmm.
interrupts to be unhelpful and dismissive, and then they continue.
Yes.
But I was just like, this the what was happening with Orlando declaring the beauty of this woman? Are they not? I don't know. I was like, are they being coy and they're continuing after? What's going on? But yeah, so I wasn't always certain what unfolded, but maybe that's just the time of things. Um, oh, sorry, I'm jumping between things. Do we want to talk about how many times Orlando dies?
Yeah.
um,
Yeah, we can.
so yeah, the first and like potentially most surprising death, one of the two times where Orlando dies for 7 days and then rises is after Sasha, and there's all the kind of
Hmm.
clear biblical connections in rising on the seventh day after rest, um, and especially with the later discussion in, I believe it's either chapter 6 or chapter 7, of the many different selves that each person has. Um,
Yeah.
if you view these deaths as the separation of selves, um,
Yeah.
and I found them quite interesting. Um, it, I think there's quite a few places where little deaths occur, like, and it can be seen as um I'm going on a small tangent here, but it's related. But there's the notion of self, and how
Yeah.
if you yourself are defined by your traits and your characteristics, if you change, are you still yourself? And so that's like my framing and understanding of the deaths within this book, that the deaths occur before and dependent on great changes within Orlando, which is kind of indicative of um, talking about Bonthorpe or Shell again, where
Hmm.
before Orlando meets them, they declare themselves dead, they lie on the floor, impassive to the world. And so she has that experience, and then she changes and she becomes married, she becomes engaged, she becomes the thing that the time and the century is insisting for her to be. And I think it's kind of interesting. I really read it as sort of part narrative tool, but mostly a demonstration of the each change as the death of the self and the birth of a new one. Um,
Hmm.
but yeah,
Yeah. No, I agree. It is very interesting to look at it through that capacity of the specifically with the fuck it's a one.
oh hi
The separation of
Pesky.
selves.
Sorry. Um,
Pesky. Hi Pesky.
I hope you're
Wait,
doing good.
crap. I forgot. I just realized.
Oh,
I need to do my daily book.
30 books.
Yeah, I've totally only been here for 30 streams.
Mhm.
Only this is
Back in
the only
my
stream.
day.
Yeah, it's hilarious. But yeah, I do like it in the capacity with the like the not the death of self, but you know what I mean. That whole idea of like the separation of selves, and
Mhm.
then like the death of each of the. Yeah, I really enjoy that, and it is a very interesting idea attached to it, and the many deaths of Orlando.
Yeah. I also think that it's a section which it it's clearly connected in part to the themes, but in the closing chapter, when there's the discussion of Orlando as the oldest as she's seen within the story, um,
Mm,
searching for a different form of herself and
mm,
like flicking between them.
mm.
That section felt a little separated from the rest of the story to me.
To a degree, yes, I
Um,
agree.
which it's clear in its like connection to the prior themes with if you view it as the deaths and the separations of selves and
Mm,
the death as a motif and not as a like sincere final endpoint, and the idea that in growth and development you can reflect and still be present within the versions of yourself that you have been, which I think this is it, it
yeah,
in to me interpreted to represent. Um, but
almost like an idea of death isn't a finality; it's just a change.
hmm. I think the death which Orlando describes is certainly as that.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, we do have death as a certain finality within the book, with examples of Orlando mourning Queen Elizabeth and his father,
Oh,
um,
yeah,
and
yeah, yeah.
the effects those have on him. And so,
Mm,
yeah, it was quite curious to me. I yeah,
yeah.
the sentences also became very different in that closing segment. I don't know how to like sufficiently communicate it, but you went from sentences that were paragraphs to sentences that were 1 to 3 words quite consistently, often with exclamation marks or questions to like continue and connect from. Um, which yeah, it was peculiar, and
Yeah.
it felt like a natural development, but I almost felt like I felt like I'd missed something in the setup, and so maybe there's like an embedded theme that builds up to it that I hadn't felt connected to in its presentation, or maybe it's one of those cases where if I go back and I read it in another however many years' time, I'll understand that point and perspective more. But
Yeah. Maybe. I do think it might be something that the more you read about it or like around an idea like that in other places and then revisit it with the idea of that in mind, it might become a lot more clear and like just time. might help with it in a lot of ways.
Potentially.
If you know,
Yeah.
I definitely do want to revisit this book eventually with like a lot of that capacity and stuff.
Mm.
But capacity with that idea in mind. So,
Yeah.
Dust has 0 books read in the library. What the hell? Do you just not redeem it? I guess Dust doesn't redeem it.
Well, I,
That's
I,
kind of
I have
funny.
access to the database behind it. I can artificially inflate the book score.
Wait, true, you could actually just give him like an infinite amount and ruin it.
I've got the most books. Uh,
Oh, you can also do that part.
yeah.
I was gonna say you should give him 1 book so that you ruin his like streak,
I mean,
but you could also artificially inflate yourself, I guess.
there's been a few cases where the book counter hasn't worked, and I've had to go in and like manually update people's scores to have them, um, just to make sure it gets counted. So, um, but yeah, it's curious. Um, yeah,
It's curious, yeah.
those two paragraphs that address the different versions coexisting within Orlando, quite
Hmm,
confusing.
yeah.
Because there's the little closing segment quite towards the end of the book where Orlando calls out for Orlando repeatedly.
Hmm,
Um, which I'm gonna just read them out because I feel like without the context I can't hope to communicate things about it. Um, then she called out hesitantly, as if the person she wanted might not be there. Orlando? For as if there for if there, at a venture, 76 different times, all ticking in the mind, at once, how many different people are there, not, heaven help us, all having lodgment at one time or another in the human spirit? Some say 2,000 or 52. So there's the most usual thing in the world for a person to call, directly they are alone. Orlando?
hmm,
If this is one's name, meaning by that, come, come, I am sick to death of this particular self, I want another. Hence the astonishing changes we see in our friends. But it's not altogether plain sailing either, for though one may say, as Orlando said, being in the country and needing another self presumably, Orlando, still the Orlando she needs may not come. These selves of which we are built up, one on top another, as plates and paled on waiters' hands, have attachments elsewhere, sympathies, little constitutions, and rights of their own, call them what you will, and for many of these things there is no name, so that one will only come if it is raining, another if in a room with green curtains, another when Mrs. Jones is not there, another if you can promise it a glass of wine, and so on. For everybody can multiply from his own experience with different terms as different selves have made with him, and some are too wildly ridiculous to be mentioned in print at all. So Orlando, at the turn by the barn, called "Orlando!" with a tone of interrogation in her voice, and waited. Orlando did not come. Not the
yeah.
clearest section of the book.
Mm-mm.
um, yeah, it's yeah. I feel like it's interesting, but it also encourages the incredibly boring these are a series of people all named Orlando, child and parent of each, that are taking up the title and the responsibilities reading of this book, which I find not in the spirit of it. um,
No,
the people are just like,
definitely not.
no, trans people, those don't exist. This is a story about multiple generations. Don't ask us any more
Yeah.
questions. And it's like, so this part I feel like in some section a bit of grumpiness too, because it's the part which I think is used to most defend that reading of it, which is just like surreal that people try to argue for in my eyes, but
It
like
like to me that reading, I did see some people talk about that, and it's like insane to me because like it undermines so much of what this book is trying to say. To
yeah.
have that reading of the book, and I don't understand how like
Yeah.
Yeah.
People will be in places of authority to read and talk about books and are just like so confused about the very notion of gender that they will simply not read the book. Is all I can conclude. I
Mm,
yeah,
yeah, no.
I don't know.
Some
It
people like to not read the book by reading the book.
yeah, it's a weird one, but I suppose it is an interesting series of ideas. But I think I just got grumpy with the section because of the interpretation, which like sometimes maybe that occurs naturally in good faith, but I feel like it
Mm,
more commonly than not just has transphobic connotations, and so I
yeah.
get grumpy with this, the part that's used to justify it, which might be a little unfair. But one thing which I wanted to talk about, which I found quite interesting, is um the continuous use of the biographer narrator in addressing the audience and using the masculine he when describing the reader's lived experience.
Mm,
And
yeah.
I just thought it was interesting and very intentional because we can clearly
Yeah.
see within the book that Wolf isn't under the illusion of the time, especially the time towards the start of Orlando, where it would only be great men reading this book and capable of engaging with
Mm,
his ideas and having interesting conversations. And so it's not a kind of, it feels like an intentional satire of that. And
yeah.
yeah, I, it almost feels as if maybe this is like a naive over expansion, but as if the book was intended to be read by women and this was the part which was addressing as male to kind of create an almost allyship with that of Orlando's experience.
Yeah. 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 Yeah, I can see that.
I feel like there's some thing in association or parallel to that, but I just thought it was an interesting note, and like a satirical extension. I took it as in part. Um, in terms of we've kind of just been stumbling around on what topics to cover. Um,
Mm,
In terms of the characters in the story, it's quite interesting how we have Orlando, who I like in the film skips several key areas and naturally removes a lot of the racism. Um, and so
yeah.
the but there's one bit which is said outright in the film, and this won't be verbatim, but it's Orlando had lived several hundred years, and because this was England, everybody was simply too polite to comment. Um, and
Mm,
there's kind of this address and understanding. And when I was rereading this, I was going into it, and I was just like, I believe Orlando is the only character within the story who lives several hundred years, who lives these many lives in a way, or in a more profound and greatly divided way than most. Um, but are there other characters who also have this experience? Because you do get these reoccurring characters who are, I think Green is probably the greatest example, um, who
yeah.
I kind of interpreted as the like spiritual successor or descendant of, depending on the
Mm,
position or character, rather than another single continuous being. Um, but I thought they were quite interesting because we have um, the member of high society who Orlando sees first in Constantinople and then keeps trying to marry her, I believe.
yeah.
I forgot his name.
I forgot. Yeah.
But he like exists and like changes to the different parts of the world and story and the figure he represents. Um,
Yeah.
but the one which was most interesting to me was Queen and Orlando's relationship with the literary world,
Mm,
because I see two interpretations of this. One being that, as Wolf kind of describes and is very invested in throughout this book, which is the idea of how poetry is perceived in our time, and this satirical address of the idea that we are constantly in the death of literature, and that all of the great poets are dead, and this current age is doomed. Um, and there's this kind of repeated experience of each generation was the last great, and we're now
Yeah.
in ruin. And in this is something that's kind of tied in quite heavily in the first half of Orlando's life, with his desire for legacy and his desire to redecorate the house and to have a record, and his adoration of poets and the notion that their words outlive them. Um, and so this kind of continues and builds upon as a theme. And when looking, I'm just kind of bringing this together as ideas because we're discussing the
Hmm.
book in full. But when people describe the oak tree, the piece of Orlando's poetry that is kind of presented to the world, not to Green at the start, but I think it's another piece of poetry that Green's given to read and review. Um,
Hmm.
but the oak tree is this book that throughout this piece of poetry that throughout the book, throughout the hundreds of years, Orlando, through their various points in life, continues to work on. Um, and some people have interpreted it as being, oh, Orlando was just ahead of their time. The poetry would have always been great, but it was something that wouldn't have been recognized or acknowledged at the time, in the same way that, like, the world was incorrectly perceiving them as male, and then it was only
Hmm.
as the world like correctly processed and parsed and interacted with them, seeing it as like a traditional feels like the wrong phrase here, seeing it as more of like a direct trans allegory of experience rather than the kind of magical realism experience asterisks. I don't know the best way to phrase it. Um,
Hmm.
but the idea that the poetry was always good and the world just couldn't experience it at the time, versus my experience of this was a poetry a 15-year-old wrote. It
Yeah.
might have been good poetry for a 15-year-old. But oh boy, have we not all wrote poetry at 15 and thought, I'm going to be a poet. And so I kind of was with the perspective and interpretation that although the poetry received accolades when it was published in 1920 or 1910, I can't remember the exact date. Um, I I was under the impression that as Orlando had changed, so had the oak tree. And although there is still some elements, you still have Orlando's like continuous devotion and fixation on nature, as the beautiful section discussing the colors of green at the start. That was when I was just like, I knew I was in for a treat with the prose. Um, but also, uh, when despairing about the expectation to have a husband and declaring that
Hmm.
Orlando's is nature's bride. Um, I was kind of under the impression that the poetry in the oak tree had improved and developed as Orlando had refined and came to understand themselves and grew up and matured. Um,
Yeah.
I wasn't thinking of the oak tree as like a singular, permanent, set in time piece of work that simply wasn't understood until present. Um,
Okay.
and I've seen
Yeah.
both interpretations,
I've
but
also seen both.
yeah, I am kind of leaning towards the it evolved and changed piece rather
Same.
than the people just didn't like the only the geniuses of the past are geniuses. The geniuses of the present are like living in the age of dead poetry. I don't know. It
Yeah.
yeah. I feel like people take Woolf's mockery of the contemporary literary environment and apply it to that part of the work where it may not have been intended as
Yeah.
connected to it. But again,
Yeah.
I've studied this book far more than I'm capable of, frankly. So I'm not an
Same.
authority. That was just my reading of it. Um,
I do find it funny the whole idea though of like the last great time in poetry was the last one.
mhm.
Like because if you say that now and you're like the last great time in poetry was before the 1920s, people would laugh at you. But in that time people really thought that, which is
Well,
hilarious.
if you take it not for poetry but for literature, it's exactly what people are saying. They go into a bookstores and they say literature's awful nowadays. It's all romantasy. There's no good books being published.
Yep.
When Piranesi came out in the last decade, so
Yeah,
it's
that's
still
the crazy
happening.
part.
I think like poetry isn't like a popular genre in the way it used to be, proportionate to the amount of
No.
books published. Um, and so like the focus has changed, but people are still insistently saying music's not as good as it used to be,
Yeah.
books aren't as good as they used to be. It's still happening, maybe not so much as in poetry as it used to, but across like media and cultural review, it's still very much a trend.
My favorite one of them is like on short-lived medias. So like um games is a great example, which is like games aren't as good as they used to be. Bro, games are like 40 years old. We're not even through the first arc of gaming. Like if you look at like long form medias like books that have been around for like millennia, and that already like dude, no, gaming is like gaming's a baby, bro. Leave it alone.
I mean, you could look back at games like Go and say that it's been around for similar length of time, but
Yeah, but like yeah,
I suppose it depends how much
yeah,
you want to
I
like connect
guess.
the
But
changing
like
formats with the yeah.
yeah, because like I guess like you could do that, but like saying like chess is like yes, chess and then like Left 4 Dead 2 is the same type of vibe as like hmm,
Are you?
or like God forbid chess and Among Us.
I feel like there's sincere cases where people compare and use the same like tools and discussion and points to analyze TikToks as they do Shakespeare. So
Yeah, that's also true.
I don't
That's
know. I
also
don't know.
true.
It depends how much you want to generalize when discussing the generations of things. Oh, hi, Pusen.
Welcome,
How you doing?
welcome, welcome.
Um, but yes, the characters. Um,
Hmm.
I was kind of pleasantly surprised by how childish young Orlando was, and something which I appreciated, which this feels like a strange thing to remark on, but I appreciated that the maturity didn't occur directly and immediately from the gender change, but happened following
Hmm.
it. Um, because
I agree.
I feel like it would have been reductive and untrue, but also would have been more easily taken in bad faith if it was just Orlando is now a woman and understands the way of the world, um,
Yeah,
as opposed to Orlando is now a woman and is having classic 14-year-old thoughts at the age of 20. And so
yeah.
I really appreciated the kind of different stages of development. And
Hmm.
although within the kind of contemporary conversations regarding feminism and women's experiences, some of them are less riveting than they were at the time, I can still appreciate it. Um, I just find the tone of how a lot of it's addressed difficult to kind of ally and rally with in humour because of the intermingled racism. But
Yeah,
I'm trying not to
valid.
fixate on it. I'm trying so hard. Um,
Yeah,
yeah,
that is valid.
I'm not the best at separating things like that from media I
Hmm.
consume, but
No, valid.
yeah,
You don't
I
have to be.
I know, but it's generally not the approach that's held when reviewing things when intending to be kind of
Sure, but like, yeah.
yeah yeah. Well, it's one of those things where I think there's well do I wanna
Mm.
I'm gonna speak off the cuff about this, and I think it's important, but I think there's a benefit in engaging in media and being like, this is neither wholly good nor wholly bad, and I will still thoughtfully engage with it, despite being critical of it in ways beyond mere taste and instead based in values, and still engage and take value from it, um,
Yeah,
rather than just not engaging. And so,
yeah,
yeah.
true. Valid.
Um, But yes, I suppose the part of the book which I feel like I was first enthralled by is the writing. The
Mm.
prose. This is
Very pretty purple prose.
very pretty purple prose. I have, I fear, become known as, for my like set perspective in book club, as being the like purple prose enthusiast. Um, and
Mm.
I think prose can be a really incredible tool within storytelling, and having the
Yeah.
prose depict the character, or the perspectives, nature, or the tone of the world can be just an additional and beautiful way to make the experience of reading it more all-encompassing and more personalized. It's also just an excuse to flex. There can be beauty in efficiency and precision of communication. Um, Maybe
Mm.
not in like a literary context. It's something I'm super versed in, but as someone who like I was a math student. That's what I did my degree and masters and my research work in. I'm very familiar with precise, brief, and efficient communication. Um, I'm
You're a
I'm
math? You
I'm
like
a
math?
maths. I wouldn't get that far. So
You like math? I didn't know
well,
that.
I feel like it.
We
I don't
never
know.
speak about it.
I feel like it doesn't come up that much because I'm just being
Not
silly on the
anymore.
internet. Yeah, maybe I'll do
Not
programming
anymore.
streams again someday. Um, but the this is close to, if not, there were times where I had to read this book very slowly because of how dense it is in the way that the prose is purple and the way that there are details within the story that are tonal and significant but not structurally relevant. And there was like one or two times I was reading it slowly and I was just like, wow, this might be like reaching the upper limit for me of like how purple I want my prose. This might be getting towards the edge. But it's just so incredibly well crafted. That was also normally the part, and I was just generally grumpy with the book in general. And so yeah, I can understand why it might be off putting for others. I think is more so the perspective I wanted to communicate. But I loved it. There were quite a few sections which I wrote down and highlighted just in terms of quotes. Um,
Yeah,
I yeah I have
the prose is so pretty.
oh oh
There's so many quotes and parts of the prose that I find so pretty.
yeah, the one which really kind of stuck with me was early on in the book. Um, the color green. Do you know the bit
Mm.
I'm talking
Mm.
about? Um,
Yeah, I do.
uh, bu 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 bu. Um,
There's a lot of quotes in this book that's really pretty.
yeah, the bit which I kind of fell in love with the writing of it was soon he had covered 10 pages and more with poetry. He was fluent, evidently, but he was abstract. Vice, crime, misery were personages of drama, and there were kings and queens of impossible territories. Horrid plots confounded them, noble sentiments suffused them. There was never a word said that he would, if as it he himself would have said it, but it was all turned with a fluency and sweetness that which, considering his age, he was not yet 17, and in the 16th century still had some years of its course to run, were remarkable enough. At last, however, he came to a halt, as describing all young poets are forever describing nature, and in order to match the shade of green precisely, he looked, and here he showed more audacity than most, at the thing itself, which happened to be a laurel bush growing beneath the window. After that, of course, he could write no more. Green in nature is one thing, green in literature another. Nature and letters seem to have a natural antipathy. Bring them together and they tear each other to pieces. The shade of green Orlando now saw spoilt his rhyme and split his meter. Um, I just, I was, yeah.
Yeah.
very
That one
compelling.
is really, really pretty. There's a
Yeah.
lot of shorter quotes in this that's also really pretty and good. I also love the nothing thicker than a knife's blade separates happiness from melancholy, which is also really pretty.
Mm. Yeah. I feel like it is a huge part of the book, but oftentimes when people discuss quotes from Orlando, the quotes are really all kind of the they're more so the narrator's perspective of the like
Mm,
snappy one-liners about
very
gender.
often.
They're the like most quoted elements, and it's understandable why they have the takeaway because that is the main motif throughout the book.
Yeah.
Um,
I mean, the most attributed quote to Orlando to the book is the as long as a woman speaks of a man, nobody objects to her speaking, with the whole idea of like the only time women were allowed to speak or what they were allowed to think about is in capacity with a man. That's the most quoted quote from Orlando, and it's exactly about that. It's about the whole like gender and speaking about that thing. And that's what often is the quoted lines from this is stuff like that. Also, that quote does go hard. I will say that quote goes hard
yeah.
because like so often in that time, but even in media that was told very recently, they would not pass something like the Bechdel test.
Mm,
Yeah.
yeah.
But like it is often quotes like that, or there's a quote in that capacity that I really really like from it, which is the whole one of um, a a woman knows very well that though a wit sends her his poems,
Mm,
praises her judgments, solicits her criticism, and drinks her tea, this by no means signifies that he respects her opinions, admires her understanding, or will refuse, through rapier is denied to him, to run through the body with his pen. Um, Amazing quote in that
very good.
capacity.
Yeah. This is one of the ones I was going to talk about, which is just like Virginia Woolf clearly had beef with some of her like contemporaries. I've got no other explanation.
Yeah,
Also, Queen Victoria, like quite a bit of Queen Victoria shade. Hidden in
there is a lot
Orlando.
of Queen Victoria shade.
I wasn't expecting that. I forgot about that bit. But
Yeah,
yeah,
but that quote, I love that quote.
yeah,
And like, even though he will entertain you in all of these capacities and get to that level, that is by no means a show of that he respects you at all.
yeah,
Which, yeah, but that quote is fantastic. I love that quote.
yeah.
Um, there's another quote I really like really, really like in this book. Let me quickly find it. Oh, um, it is. It is, for it would seem her case proved it that we write, not with the fingers, but with the whole person. The nerve which controls the pen winds itself about every fiber of our being, threads the heart, pierces the liver. Oh, I
Yeah.
love that quote.
Just the on-page writing is incredible. Um, yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of on-page writing that's just phenomenal.
Yeah. One thing which I found quite interesting, which is the I don't have a particularly like finished point to make about it, but
Hmm,
there's the kind of like evident oak tree, significant in the
hmm,
poetry, but also with its like allusions to the tree of life and the historical connotations to that and the permanence of it. But the presence of water and the effects of moisture throughout the book. Um, I stumbled across a comment on it when before I was doing my like hasty reread this week. And I was just caught up on how much they were talking about water. Um,
yeah.
yeah, there's yeah. I don't particularly know how to like summarize or continue, but it was very interesting to me. In terms of oh gosh, time constraint.
Yeah.
I'm thinking how much
No,
we get
no,
into.
go for it.
Well, we need to still do all the polls, which takes at least half an hour.
Yeah, go for it. Go for it. Don't worry too much.
um, let me get my notes. Uh-oh.
Hmm. Note. Wait, note God. Not the notes.
I'm just fighting technology. Please pay no attention.
You are a VTuber. It is part of the like sign in. Is that technology will hate you and you will have to fight it.
Yeah, it's been too long since I just experienced strictly significant scuff. Okay, there you go.
Yeah.
Uh,
It has been allotted to be time. The scuff shall return.
I don't remember what I was talking about.
Hmm.
But yeah, I feel like I can't sufficiently start getting into quoting the different parts of the writing that were beautiful without just poorly reading the whole book back to you all. Um,
That is my problem with this book too, or books like this that are written so beautifully, is that most of the pages are written beautifully. And honestly, I could reread this whole book in like a quote and just be like, "This is just beautiful writing and work." Um, because yeah, there's so much. Like I could probably pull up like multiple quotes per page that is just beautifully written.
yeah. Also, hello, Antux. Thank you for the hydrate. Kai, you have the hydrate as well. Um,
I will highlight as well.
uh, but yeah. Um, can my brain remember what I was thinking about earlier? No, it can't. Well, should we? I just don't feel equipped to talk about the writing. It's
Hmm.
good. It's good.
It is very good. It is very good.
It's very
Honestly,
good.
if you just want to read it through the writing, I still highly suggest this book. Just from like a pure capacity of like reading beautiful writing and beautiful prose, specifically beautiful purple or more purple prose, I would absolutely highly suggest this book. It's so good in that capacity.
Yeah.
You would enjoy it. Um, just from that capacity, you would really enjoy this book. I will say the story is very interesting, and there's a lot of things in the story to that's fun and get to talk about and a great time. But like, if you just care about reading it for prose, this book is fantastic in that capacity.
It's kind of interesting because although things structurally happen within the story, the
Hmm.
plot, as it were, is kind of secondary to this book. In a way,
Yeah,
it's the
I agree.
the key events that occur happen in such a way to facilitate various conversations or internal monologues and thoughts, and
Hmm.
so they're the kind of significant points of communication. I don't have the quote verbatim to hand, but an example would be when Orlando was standing outside of the window and watching several poets talk within the cafe based off silhouette and the kind of remarks
Yeah,
there. That was like a thing we didn't talk about yet, which was on. Well, I internalized it as kind of expectations and what you have been told an environment will be, and therefore it becomes that in your mind, and that's embodied by some of the part. Is it Lady R's party? Um, oh, that's the thing I
yeah.
wanted to talk about. Um,
Hmm.
the swap from characters' names to characters as letters.
Hmm.
I found it quite interesting.
It is very
Because
interesting.
I believe it happens around the time on return from Constantinople. I think the last
Hmm.
person who, or what, some of the last people who get names. There's I don't know how to address Shell without saying their full name, and I can't say their full name. But there's
Hmm.
Green and Shell and one or two others who still get names, but each character becomes only a letter. And
Hmm.
there's a few ways you can look at it which are interesting, which you can kind of see it as the blurring of time and the blurring of individuals and the lack of detail that you associate with things as more
Hmm.
time and more information has passed. But there's also something which I thought was kind of indulgent of there's a kind of assumption, more so now than there was a few hundred years ago when this was set, but of
Hmm.
women being like social creatures who care so much about the standing and
Hmm.
the polite society and all those things. And
Absolutely.
so the framing for um, Orlando now as a woman engaging in English high society too, in her description of these events, have a kind of flagrant disregard for the
Yeah,
the niceties and the societies and the individual in question was kind of interesting and fun to me. Um,
it is very interesting and fun.
that was the main that they were the main lenses that I read it with, but I realized that those were both kind of applied rather than communicated from the text. And so I was wondering if you had a read on that, on the naming
I
swap.
I actually got so the first time I read it, I actually read it more like in like a disconnect on like a
Oh, I
that
see it.
like at, yeah, like there was a disconnect with that idea.
Hmm.
Um, that's the first time I read it. This time I read it, when I read it this time, I actually got closer to what your like second idea was. I actually got closer to that, and I kind of like that idea. That's why I was actually so excited when you mentioned it, is because like yeah, I got that's what I read it with like the applied idea, because I do think all of these ideas are mostly like applied to it rather than implied by it. Because I don't think there's an implied right answer for why it happens or why she does it, if you know what I mean.
Hmm.
But like yeah, so like I actually got very close to what you were talking about, and yeah, it's really really good. I like it.
Yeah, because it is. Orlando's age is never really objected to or acknowledged, and people are
Mm-mm.
really quite accommodating about the change in gender. Um, well,
Yeah,
all things
which is
considered,
really interesting.
yeah. Um, the only matter is like the slight legal matter, and then there's even within that the like framing of the ridicule of it all of um legally you're dead and also legally you're the woman, with the
Yeah,
comment which is about the same at the time. Um, but the
yeah,
I think that interpretation of it being disconnect is interesting because despite Orlando living so long and being even at like the first appearance in chapter one an outlier within
mm,
society to some extent,
mm,
um, there isn't really much discussion of disconnect outside of having the poet's disease and all those kind of
yeah,
descriptions, um, until discussing the difficulty into acclimatizing to the 20th century and how everybody's
yeah,
having 18 children and how Orlando has
yeah.
to mirror the spirit of the age and doesn't feel accustomed to doing so. And
Mm.
so reading that as disconnect and the names is in parallel, something building up to that disconnect is interesting.
Yeah,
Um,
that's where I also got to it. It was like in that capacity as like the adjustment to the new age and almost the like forced having to go with what the new age is doing as well was a very interesting idea behind it. Um,
yeah, I still don't know where I sit with Shell because I'm just like
yeah,
yeah,
hmm.
because
No,
structurally satirical and a marriage of convenience, but internally framed
hmm,
as sincere and romantic and a profound connection and attraction.
hmm.
And I just don't know how to reconcile the two. I don't know.
Yeah, no, I get what you mean. I'm kind of there too.
Yeah.
It's like I'm very much in the same space, and I've reread this book now 2 times. This is my third reading, and I still, yeah. I That's why I also like the like whole beard comment because yeah,
Yeah. I little old me read Orlando Still Loved Women, and I was just rooting for her to have a girlfriend the very first time I read it. I was just like, what's
yeah.
their husband doing here? What happened? What happened to
Uh,
that nice lady who she walked one lap around the town with and then vanished off to her rooms? Let's go back to that. Why is there a man? Sorry.
Take the beard away. Take this beard away. Come on.
Um, Teenage
We don't
me
need the
had their
beard here.
priorities. But yeah. Um, yeah.
Uh,
I
that's crazy.
I do think something that's quite interesting is the discussion of the wedding ring as the performance, and I've
Hmm.
forgotten the name of it, but the clothing garment that's used that's worn during pregnancy during that period. Um,
Hmm.
and like the
I
performance
forgot
of
the
those
names.
two that then immediately foreshadow marriage to Shelmerdale and then briefly addressed
Hmm.
pregnancy and birth. Um,
Yeah, very briefly mentioned.
yeah,
Addressed.
I just
Um,
thought that they were quite interesting.
it
Um,
is very interesting.
yeah, I
Shelmadier.
something else which I
That's a name, by the way.
Bonthorpe Shelmerdale. You've got to go the whole.
Yeah, it's a
um,
name. It's a name we would find in a fantasy series.
yeah,
But yeah, it is very interesting. Like, I also forget the name of that like article of clothing.
is it a crinoline?
I think crinoline. Sounds familiar. Crinoline.
Uh, yeah, it was like a new development in one of the chapters. And then yeah. It's very nicely depicted in the film adaptation, Shadow Tilda Swinton, by Orlando really struggling to walk through her house because of the giant crinoline skirt. Because
Yeah.
if you're not familiar with what a crinoline is, I think I'm saying the right word, which is at least what I'm intending to refer to, is a very structurally large skirt, but not a round one, almost a rectangular skirt. Um,
Yeah.
and so there's yeah.
Also, yes, it seems that it is a crinoline.
Okay. One of the most famous scenes from the film that's the like shot that gets taken and reposted on Tumblr semi-frequently is of Orlando running through the maze in the garden with this crinoline, and then at the end standing in like end of 19th century attire, um, which I thought was like a fun way to do the change in time. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah,
Yeah. It is very interesting. I also like the implication of it being um so those are actually used in like actual history as well to hide pregnancies,
yeah,
which is hilarious to me. That like they would walk around, they made a fashion choice that everybody should walk around in like massive gowns so that some women could hide pregnancies until they give birth.
yeah. I
Such a good idea. Banger.
yeah, that yeah. One thing which I think this might be the last kind of key theme that I bring up before we go to
Hmm.
conclusions and then nominations, just because I'm conscious that we're running on a slightly stricter time schedule than usual.
Hmm.
But something that I find quite interesting is how the book refers quite a few times to incredible words, infinite wisdom, and profound conclusions, and doesn't state them.
Yeah.
As you kind of have to, really. But
Yeah.
yeah.
I like how funny it is because they're like, oh yes, this incredible wisdom that we've learned here now.
And
Which one? They just don't elaborate.
then it's like, as you'll be so familiar with, so won't be stated here.
Oh,
Um,
so good.
yeah, it's quite fun. Um, yeah.
If any other book tries it, though, I would be mad.
No, I mean
But
it's.
this pulls it off.
I think it's better than trying to state something and then framing it in that way.
True. But
Because
like,
yeah,
yeah, I can see that.
I think if you try to confidently state that you have a divine and perfect sentence, you're in more trouble unless it's intended as a satirical mockery of the character, or a sincere mockery of the character describing it. Um,
True. Yeah, yeah, I take it back. That's true. It would be so much worse if you are like, ah, yes, this profound wisdom in these words I speak, and then you write a really not profound thing.
it needs to be pans to background or 42 is the answer to everything. That's like the only ways it can be handled well, I think.
Yeah.
But
Unless you do write a banger, insightful thing. Unless you're like Tolkien and you're just like goated with it, and
I
you
don't
can actually
know.
pull it off.
I feel like in those cases it's still never internally framed as that.
Oh, I can't speak.
You can't speak?
It's a spoiler for a book that I really like that you still have to read with me.
Is this The Way of the
Stormlight.
Kings? Stormlight?
No,
If they wanted me
it's
to
not
read Stormlight, they should have handled book 2 better. Sorry, I'm grumpy. I'm mad.
not Mistborn, not Mistborn. Stormlight.
Oh, Stormlight. Oh, okay.
Okay, it's from book two. In book two,
Okay.
there's yeah. So like, I can't speak even about it, or anything around it. But yeah,
We'll get there at some point. Um.
we will, we will do it.
Oh, yes. Okay, I told a fib when I said we were about to talk about our final theme, which is
Mm,
something which I interpreted differently to some reviews and discussions that I've seen, is
yeah,
the period of Orlando's life when she wants a life and a lover. And that's something that
yeah,
she fixates on. She like views that she is lacking because of not having or not quite understanding. I think this is actually something before the trip to Constantinople when it's the male Orlando, because it's
mm,
in the decorating of the house the a form of busyness and life is achieved, but it feels shallow from the disconnection. Yes, I misapplied the start, but that was something which, although it was kind of a returning motif of the different forms of Orlando throughout the book, I didn't view that as an overarching aspiration in the way
yeah,
that other people seem to, because even within those callbacks it has permutations. In the start of the 20th century, when influenced by the world around her, it becomes life a lover, not life a husband. And there's the
mm,
remarks in this way on how it kind of like changes with society. So in the same way the early Orlando wished for his works to be published and read and remembered um, forever in writing, and then wanted to decorate the house and add to the legacy. Although it's called back to on more occasions, I kind of used this as a stage in development, and it was called back to more so because life and a lover are very abstract statements, and so remarking on
yeah,
how the understanding of each of those two things had changed over time. Um,
yeah,
Whereas I've seen people kind of view it as Orlando's driving motivation and how they live this long
yeah,
life and end up with Shell. And like, maybe I am just not
yeah,
viewing Shell as important in the book as he's intended to be or is to others,
mm,
because I don't fully. I how he is presented, I can't find a way to cohesively understand all the ideas and themes that I see within his presentation.
Hmm.
And so maybe I'm just minimizing his significance of the story out of discomfort within that. But yeah.
Maybe, but I
Do,
kind of also agree that it's not like going as far as saying it's his main. It's like the main motivation, or like even like a massive driving force. I think isn't true.
yeah.
I
Well,
don't think it is.
there's the kind of discussion of because this is the point I was getting to, because there's a slight way in which I can see that lens and understand it, in that it could be life a lover in the abstract sense of the lover is the oak tree poem and the life,
Maybe.
especially because there is the part where once Orlando has handed the poetry over and she no longer has access and control to it and is no longer with her, she immediately runs to fax or communicate in the way of the time. It's not fax. Um, to send a
Hmm.
letter, to send a note to Shell. And so, how, in place of the poem no longer being there as the lover, the husband um, is like a way I
I
could see
guess.
it, but I'm not fully convinced. If there is life in
Yeah.
a lover, it's the oak tree. um,
Yeah.
to
I
me, to
I
me.
don't know. I yeah. I like the idea more of like that as like an idea instead of like, oh
one of
yes, I
the
want to have a lover.
20,000 self aspirations, and simply one
Yeah.
that's called back to, similar to Sasha.
Yeah. Exactly. Instead of
Yeah.
like, oh yes, like yeah.
And it like
Because like
unquestionably shapes Orlando, but that doesn't mean that it's still present just
yeah.
because it's shaped her.
And also, you have things that shape you in life that aren't like driving forces behind who you are, or like important in that capacity to a degree as well. Like a lot more shapes us than things that I set out to live my life around. You know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
mm, like, yeah. It's just like yeah. So I'm not the biggest fan of that idea of, because I've also seen it around that like the idea that Orlando is like it was a main motivation for Orlando, and I disagree.
I feel
I
like,
do like your reading of like the poem as
yeah.
that.
I think
Like
I think we're kind of both edging around it. If the main rejection I have of that idea, or the main discomfort, is that it takes this book, which is about developing and understanding the identity as a woman, and defines it around a romantic interest with a man.
yeah,
Um, and so like I'm more content with it being about an abstract or a like non-traditional love of poem in your life's work. But I
yeah,
feel, if it feels incompatible with some of the like spirit of the book to me. But maybe
yeah.
I'm not the most I'm very rarely most entangled by the romantic aspects of stories, so maybe I'm just missing out on something. I don't know. I don't think that's the case here, but I don't want to be like
No,
this interpretation is wrong. I don't see
yeah.
it.
It feels weird to like minimize it to that degree of like the whole idea is around love, when in this book a criticism and a quote is love, the poet said, is a woman's whole existence, and that it is trying to shit on that idea and be like that idea
Yeah.
is not great, and then to minimize the whole book to that feels incredibly weird when that is a direct quote from the book that the book is telling you.
I think it's the case because a lot of the time when people read a book, they want there to be a driving story. They want there to be a momentum. They want there to be a plot. They want there to be an enemy or a feat to conquer. And so conquering life a lover is a like narratively satisfying experience in the
Yeah,
way that an exploration in the experience of gender over the course of 300 years is like less easily to address or internally parse. And I would
yeah,
say, if you want a like theme of like a feat conquered or achieved for the book to describe, it's publishing the oak tree. once again, I'm on the
Absolutely.
minimizing shell campaign. I didn't realize that I felt defeated about it, but yeah. So I just wanted to like mention that because it's something I see talked about a little bit when discussing the book in like an overarching kind of casual description and discussion. Obviously, with it being wolf fighting, you can spend hours on each page and word, and I good on page writing. Thumbs up to the on page writing. I'm not equipped to, other than just being like, oh damn, that's good. Oh,
Honestly,
that's
not even
really
like
good.
good on page writing. I think good on page writing is minimizing it also to a degree. It's like phenomenal. Like like you talked about where like you can spend hours per page like going through just every single page and talking about specific word choices and a lot of the on page writing. It's like it's incredible how beautiful this book is written. I
Yeah.
love it.
Oh, I had one last thing which I wanted to talk about earlier, which I forgot about. I made a note of it because I wanted to return to it, and now I'm returning to it at an awkward time, which is talking about digging into a line, but looking at the idea of time as presented not being sincere time, um, and the kind of abstraction of that, of like a few seconds can be stretched into hours in one's mind, or years can pass by in a few seconds of a mind. The idea of, Madam, the man cried, leaping to the ground, you're hurt, I'm dead, sir. A few minutes later, they became engaged. I could also see the few minutes later having not factually described minutes, but instead being used to trivially describe the like criteria and grounding of which these decisions were historically made. I don't know. I feel like there's shenanigans at play with how little time or much time is used to describe various events, sometimes inversely.
Hmm.
Um, and I feel like there's times where it's done satirically, not just out of absurdity, but to frame the um the silly way with which the thing at hand is like considered. So the like
Yeah.
the the idea that you would in like the Elizabethan era you would marry someone without having, if you're from Orlando's class, you'd marry someone having them only seen your portrait or having never spoke to them one-on-one um and despite like months of courtship and family negotiations, or like there's kind of silly extrapolations. I feel like there's like a shenanigan at play there, where sometimes the amount of time is used to highlight the like shallowness. Or did you see the sentence I'm walking towards? This wasn't
Yeah.
one of my bullet points, and so I'm not making a good job
No, but
describing
like
it. But yeah,
I see where you're going. The idea is there, and I like the idea. I
yeah, um,
There is a very much a like, especially again, and that is an underpin for a lot of things in this book. Is like we are shown that like descriptions like this can be wrong in a lot
mhm,
of places, and the narrator has shown to be unreliable in fact, specifically. And like facts that they say. So like stuff like time or timelines, and even like ideas of like facts around situations are often shown to be wrong. Not often shown, but have been shown to be wrong.
yeah,
So like I do agree that there is definitely this whole idea of like, especially when you're like a very common saying with people falling in love is like they fell in love instantly,
yeah.
which is a very interesting idea. On like no, you don't. But like also to a
Well,
degree, yes, you do because of like how,
I
yeah,
I see
you
people
know what I
use it
mean?
to describe instant attraction rather than instant love, and the suggestion that it was
Hmm.
like a physical entanglement with Shell rather than an emotional connection. But
Yeah,
I don't know. I that was less the interpretation that I had, and more so the like flexible understanding of time that the story possesses, and the convenience of needing a husband. Yeah. Okay.
yeah,
Should we do our little wrap up of
yeah.
is it expected what I was? Is it what I was expecting going in? In some parts, yes. In other parts, more racist.
Yeah,
The prose was
yeah.
incredible. The exploration of gender was interesting. Um, the racism was there.
Sadly.
Yeah, and there's other layers of things that were not good. There's like colonialism. There's a lot of classism, but the racism is there. It's there.
It is.
Yeah. Um, but is it exactly what I was going in? I was. The prose was even better than I expected. It's even better than I remembered.
Mm.
I'm trying not to just be like harping on, and so I'm restarting my description. But yeah, I
I agree.
yeah
Um, for me, it was it was what I expected going in, mostly because, like I said, I reread this book like 5 years ago, so I kind of do remember a lot of what it is. I will say the racism does surprise me every single time because it is very heavy on it in a
I
lot of places where I
yeah.
don't expect it. Um,
It's kind of
but no, this
jarring,
was
particularly because it's
it
portraying
is.
like quite contemporary views and ideas of gender and feminism, and then just
Yep,
racism. And it's like it's one of those things where like you're reading an older book, you kind of expect there to be
something wrong.
things that you would find deplorable and like wouldn't accept within media you pick up today, and then you're just like, oh, this is an interesting idea about like the socialized norms of gender and how these are habits trained into us rather than ones innate to us based off how we dress and therefore how we present. Um,
Yeah,
oh, a slur, okay, and it just
yeah,
it's so discombobulating to see progress and regression step by step, like alternating. I
yeah,
yeah
yeah. It is. Yeah, it's definitely something.
yeah. Um, how much did I like the book? I don't know.
Yeah,
Yeah, when I finished the book the first time, I was like mad at it. I was annoyed at it.
fair,
Um,
fair.
yeah, it's an incredible book, but I was annoyed at it
It is.
a significant part of the way through. Um, the prose I adore. I get, yeah, because I'm not because I don't engage with and like recommend classics and like older books a huge amount. I guess I just haven't fully kind of
Mm,
deconstructed and understood my perspective of discussing and recommending older books when they are so egregious on some things. Um,
mm,
and so it's on this things where I struggle to kind of reconcile my appreciation aspects with just the extreme discomfort of other parts. Um,
yeah.
and so it's like I loved some of the prose in this book. I love how nature's described. The scene setting is gorgeous. There's incredible insights for the time, but still applicable on like talked about it before the socialization of gender.
Mm.
The I, yeah, but
There's
as
a lot of really amazing in this.
yeah, but but I could understand why some people would just simply never want to read it, and I think that's fair.
Yep, yep.
Um,
I agree.
yeah.
That's very valid that you were also mad at it the first time you read it. So like, yeah,
Yeah, it
I
was. Yeah, it's why I wanted to reread it because I still got a big one period the second time, but
mm,
I just wanted to try and engage with it fully because it's a book that's gone on to be kind of heralded as like one of the great pieces of queer media of the 20th century, and I understand why, but it's so racist. Like it's
it
so
is.
racist. And so I was just
Yep.
kind of just like I want to engage with and I want to be joyous and I'm also impressed at the prose, but also the period of time where these ideas were being discussed in this way, especially with like the like the the, the like British colonial gender binary and the expectations that come with it are by no means a universal experience. So to say historically that this is a revolutionary idea isn't true. But if you look at the like class and background that Virginia Woolf was from, and writing to describe and writing within, new within that context. And so like
Yeah.
yeah, I
Yeah.
I got complicated thoughts on it because I yeah
Fair. No,
I
it's very fair.
I think that I don't know, like progress should be accepted if it's not perfect, but like oh dear God, it's really racist. The book I anyway
It
yeah
is.
I don't know how to reconcile it. Um, I like the book. I think is my conclusion. I yeah it's
You're like, okay,
I
good.
think so. I just I I think that there is value to engaging with a piece of media, aware of its point in history, and being critical of and addressing it within that. And although you
Hmm.
have like, at least I have like a very visceral emotional reaction to it, and one that I like then struggle to parse the rest of my emotions and feelings around it with.
Hmm.
I do think there's incredible value to the book and continuing to engage with it. I just kind of
Hmm.
wish that it was mentioned more because I feel
Hmm.
like I'm being like I feel like I'm being crazy when I'm just like, oh, I'm repeating myself. But it just feels
No.
so under discussed when looking at the book, and so um, I feel like
Yeah.
it makes me feel more at odds with the adoration the book receives because it's something that's kind of minimized at times when discussing it. Um,
Yeah.
yeah,
Mm, I absolutely see where you are coming from with that whole thing and that whole idea, and I do agree. Um, it is very much something with like that you have to parse when you're reading books this old, but specifically like classics this old. Um, is and to a degree, um, what's the word? Like there is the whole idea around why is my brain blanking? Death of an author and the capacity of like how ideas of an author doesn't change, but also ideas of like how what parts of authors do you value,
hmm
what parts of stories do you value, what
yeah.
parts can you separate from the good parts. All of these are
I
heavy
think,
topics to discuss when you are
yeah,
talking about like books this old or books like this that have some things in them that are
I think
not great.
that's in part why I find it so difficult to kind of fully embrace the positive aspects because
Hmm.
when discussing the separation of the harmful things in this book, most of them are ones that do not address me and I will not experience the negative aspects of. And so
Hmm.
I, I, I feel like I can have no response other than to be like outraged and upset and sad, and and so like the disconnect and the separation of that I feel unequipped and out of place to do, and so I'm just kind of yeah
Yeah, it is hard.
old
It is
books.
definitely hard. It's definitely a hard thing to tackle. And honestly, it took me a long, long while to find where I fall on it. And it was only in reading hard books like this that has stuff that I actually do find where I land on the topic and like that I can like yeah, where
Yeah,
I yeah. It is hard. It is a very hard topic, and I do think I do get your instinct of like feeling like you're like talking too much about it or like doing all of this, but like I do think it is worth it.
yeah, yeah. It's
Um,
it's it's. Maybe I'll become more efficient in expressing my thoughts over the years. You're seeing character development in real time here. But would I read
yeah,
a sequel or another book by the author? Yeah. um, I as much as I struggle to maybe suggest say that I would like wholeheartedly recommend this book to everyone, or that I would like say that I like the book because of some of the things it contains. I do think there's incredible value in reading it. I think that it is a thoughtful exploration of gender and feminism and the lived experience of women. I think it is lacking in other aspects. Like no
Yeah.
notion of like class or race intersectionality here. Let's be
No.
clear. It's a very specific
Mm-mm.
interpretation of these experiences, but I do think it's an incredible, thoughtful, and worthwhile one, and written so beautifully regarding the prose. I will
Incredibly pretty.
continue to reread more of Wolf's work, possibly in my own time in smaller segments, because I think this book benefits being in a book club environment in that you get to discuss it, but it's
Yeah.
also I often find that if I'm reading a book that is kind of challenging in the way that older books are, of being an incredible feat but also containing things that would not stand today, rightly so, um, it's something that is best processed when engaged with at like your own pace, and so it's yeah. I don't know. I'll keep reading Virginia Woolf's work. I I'll just go into it with
Yeah.
more context. uh,
That's where I land. That's where I land on that exact same question is would I read more? Yes. Knowing what I am getting into and like yeah. That's where I fall on most authors is yes I would read more of their work with like a lot more context around that stuff. Um because I do think there is a lot of value in stuff like this if you have the context and you have the what's the word? Not like
Bandwidth? I
you
don't know.
yeah, you have the bandwidth or you have like the understanding of what you're getting into and what you will engage with. I do think it's worse if it's a first reading and you just get jump scared by it. Or you just know you can't separate it to a degree. Because I think so a great example of that is like you lost a lot of faith in Carl Jung,
Mm.
specifically because of a similar and a very
Also, because he
related
was just
thing.
like, oh yeah, if you go hiking, that's suicidal ideation. Like,
Yeah,
sorry.
like the
I'll
in
count him
that
on the small things
capacity.
as well.
Well, yeah, but like in that capacity is like it's a very slippery slope of like if you do lose faith in an author and if you have this idea that like something like this will cause that or that you cannot separate it exactly, a lot of the good points in something also gets overwritten and then like yeah, I don't think it's a good thing to engage with it at that point because at
Yeah,
that point it just becomes something very negative in your life, which I would never say tell anybody to go engage with something that would have a negative effect on them or be something very negative in their life. Um,
yeah, I don't know. I think it's one of those ones where yeah, I think that's worth like engaging with things that are challenging to you. But like, I
hmm,
just think people should be very conscious with how they do so, and there's a difference between that and like reading for leisure. And when we like discuss recommending books, it's generally for the latter. Um,
absolutely.
in terms of who would I recommend it to and for, um, people who I feel like if you like the classics, you've probably read it. I don't know. It's kind of strange in the same way of oftentimes when we go to talk about classical books and non-fiction books, I I struggle to think who to recommend it to because I don't have the
Same.
like breadth of understanding of the genres to be like, oh, if you loved these like earlier 20th century writings, then you'll also like this. And so
Hmm.
I feel like I can't be insightful in that way. Um, if you uh, are like, I I feel like saying if you are trans or like you want to know more about the trans experience is not like entirely accurate, but it's also like still thoughtfully expressed. But I also feel like that's kind of it's up there on the list of books that are recommended for there anyway. So I
True.
don't know.
Yeah, I don't know who to recommend this book to.
If you
Specifically,
like
like you said,
prose,
it's like,
if you like really intricate poetic prose, um,
what? I feel like very intricate purple prose. Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know who else to recommend it for though.
Yeah.
Because it's the exact same problem that I had with confronting the classics, where it's like
Mm.
if you're curious about the classics or like the classics, you've probably already read this. And yeah. Or you haven't read it because you don't want to, or know something else, or are getting to it. So like, and then if you don't like the classics, I don't know who to recommend it to that doesn't like the classics because I don't think you should read this book if you don't like the classics. So like,
Maybe if you are not a fan of the classics but a fan of magical realism.
maybe, yeah, maybe.
I'm trying to think of like contemporary buzzwords to label, but because it doesn't get
Don't know.
framed as that a huge amount, but that is kind of the genre that it would sit within if it wasn't just described as a classic. I
Hmm,
think.
that is, yeah, that is where it sits.
Um,
Maybe, maybe that's a good. Yeah, that might be the best one of like where it should sit for a recommendation.
maybe if
I do
oh
I do like the um if you like purple prose you should read this because
yeah,
yeah.
I like if you just want to look at the craft of on-page writing, I think this is a good book for that.
Yeah,
I think any of Wolf's work
absolutely.
is great, for that.
Yeah.
But um, I suppose the last case which I'd like recommend it in is if you're interested in seeing what was considered progress in regards to feminism at different points throughout history through like a Western lens. I feel like this is pretty emblematic and significant for like a period in time for that. Um, but I also feel like if that's an interest that someone has and is aware they have, then they've probably already read this. And so I'm kind of,
Mm,
I feel like it's on this where, yeah.
agreed. Yeah.
Okay. Star ratings.
Yeah. I'm curious where you fall on this.
I'm. I feel like at some point I need to fully reconcile my kind of. I didn't think it's simply death of the author, but my experience processing and evaluating books with
Mm,
regards to like because there can be some like clumsy approximation of like Stephen King wrote women weirdly, so I'm deducting a star, but it isn't apt, it isn't appropriate, it's more kind of a shorthand for an incomplete perspective of how I want to choose to engage with media that does
yeah.
things like this. And so I don't know, I think if you were to exist in a vacuum where the book's like somehow updated and those aspects are simply in the more simple direct aspects are just removed and glossed over, then it still wouldn't be a 5-star book to me. I don't think it's a great book, but
Okay.
I'm I'm leaning somewhere in the 4-star to the 4-point-star region, 4.5-star
Okay.
region. I think.
Mm.
What about you?
So this book has been solidly a 4.5 star for me ever since I read it, really. And
Hmm.
this kind of just like solidified it. I think this is like a 4.5, like 4.75 max, but I think this is just the quintessential 4.5 to me. Um, that is where this comfortably sits in my capacity. I don't think this book is a 5 star at all. Even divorcing and taking away the like whole idea of the racism about the book, I still don't think it's a 5 star, but I do think this is a very, very good 4.5 in my capacity.
Yeah. I agree. I feel like I want to go back and reevaluate books. I'm not good at giving number ratings. I don't have one thought, I have many thoughts in parallel and they don't make any sense. This has been long established. Uh, but yeah, I'm somewhere similar. I think if I had to like evaluate the things that I would describe negatively, which I feel woefully unequipped to do, but I'm gonna do it anyway. Um,
Hmm,
I feel like there's the pacing is very abstract. I don't know how else to describe it, but the there are certain ideas which are introduced and communicated very well, but the book clearly deviates to address that idea and then returns without incorporating it again or after. And because it's written with such beautiful on page writing, you don't really mind in the moment. But when you look back at the
Hmm.
book, you see all these twists and turns that were suddenly taken, and they they largely like connect to the lived experience of a woman in high society, and so it's not to say they're without a theme, but like I think potentially more integration of some of them could have been beneficial. Um, and then yeah.
Yeah.
Oh hi Tanda, how you doing? Oh, you on the holiday? I realize I forgot how long till the trip. I hope you're doing well.
The holiday.
Um, gets to go visit the see
The
that partner.
holiday.
Exciting. Um, the holiday. It's a bank holiday in the UK at the moment, which is quite exciting. It means people are off work on Monday and can go outside, and everywhere's going to be busy when I would normally be doing my groceries in peace. Um, yeah, but yes, I
Yes.
think with that entirely unrelated tangent, we have wrapped
Yeah,
up.
that was so out of like left field. That's great.
Yeah, cause I swapped to working my like normal hours, but within a 4-day work week. I don't work Mondays, and so whenever there's a bank holiday, I'm just like, there's gonna be people in the supermarket when I want to do my groceries. Ugh. I'm antisocial. But yes,
No, I would never have guessed.
eh, um, but yes, I think that
Dania? Never.
that's in part the review of Orlando. At some point, I feel like I want to go back and talk about specific sections of the writing more in detail, but
Hmm.
I feel like that could be
I,
hours in itself, and we just don't have it. So,
I do think that could be a very long stream. That might be a very fun stream where we just like, you know what would actually be fun because I've had that idea and feeling about some other book club books is if we just do a like a book club meeting, like an off week one or one where we like sometime like a wrap up one at the end of the year or something. Um,
mhm.
where we just do like a like talking about the writing or like the great parts of books that we didn't get to talk about as much as we wanted to. And we do it full spoilers because usually by the time we get to like full spoilers, we're already a bit like tanking. So like sometimes our spoiler thoughts is just like a mess. But if we can have like a full spoiler on where we can just like full talk about a lot of the stuff, it would be so good.
I have reached the sleepy point, and my brain is going top 10 literary techniques in book club in like Miss Mojo voice. Um, And with
Yes,
that
that.
unhelpful statement, let us move on to democracy. Ooh. We will be going through the nominations for this month's book club. A little description of how voting works. We use the Twitch polls. We have to run it in two halves because you can only have up to 5 nominations in a poll at a time. You are welcome to and encouraged to vote in both halves because it is done as like winner steps forwards brackets. And so out of the first few and the second few, whoever gets the most points will both be brought forward to the finale. So even if the book you're most excited for is in the other bracket, make sure to vote in the first or the second one because then you could influence what the like alternative is. I don't know. Voting, woo! You will notice a theme amongst the books nominated this week. And to that I turn to Kai. um,
I didn't do anything. I didn't do anything.
uh-huh. Do you,
It wasn't me.
it wasn't you. You know what happened when you did this? I saw this and I was just like, wait, did Bill Bryson die? Like, what's going on? I was confused. I was like, what's happening? Um,
No, Bill Bryson didn't die.
I got scared. Like,
No,
okay,
Bill Bryson is still very much alive. He is old, but he is still alive.
I think he's retired, right?
Yeah, he's retired, but he's like 74, I think. He's like 74 years old. He's not old, but no, he didn't die. I just really want to read some Bill Bryson books. So I recommended three that I really like. Well, two that I really like and one that I haven't read but want to read.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Should we jump
so
into the first nominated book, which is The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson?
yes, I want to see if there's like I did the not good and I didn't pull up Storygraph for like any of the books, but like
You
let me grab
linked
the
them to
mother tongue.
Goodreads in the chat you sent me.
Yeah, but I didn't pull up the Storygraph for like
Oh,
content
content.
warnings
Yeah.
because yeah, we tend to use that for content warnings. Rightfully, it's way better for content warnings. It's so much better for content. Mother tongue. Even though I don't think this book would really have that many. Oh, I was wrong. Oh, it's one review. It's one person saying that there's cursing, racism, and xenophobia speak in it, like racial speak.
Mhm.
But like, it that makes sense. I kind of get it because like so the mother tongue or the full title, the mother tongue English and how it got that way by Bill Bryson is about English as a language, and like how from the origins of the word to like the status it has now as the most spoken language and like kind of our like what's the word like universal language as like what we all meet in the middle towards and the idea of like how it developed, why it developed to the stage, what influenced it, um, and then also how it became the universal language of the world. And this idea as like it is the most spoken secondary language on the planet. Um, and that whole idea. And it's all about like language and how we developed this language, including like how we developed it for writing, for like stories and a bunch of stuff like that. Um, and like yeah, this like whole tale of English as a language, um, which is I found really interesting. This is the one I haven't actually read. Um,
Okay.
is is the one about the mother tongue. And the English language, and I thought it seemed interesting. Um, it seemed very fun as a like linguistics book. I've been interested in linguistics a little bit more.
That's very fun.
Yeah, that's all. It's just yeah.
Yeah. Um, so up next is a book that I've nominated before, and I was just like, if I have an opportunity to nominate Le Guin, I will. And so it's just like, aha, this is connected because it's about it's about feminism, lived experience of women.
Mm,
Dancing at the Edge of the World by Issa K. Le Guin is an essay collection with full title Thoughts on World, Women and Places. Um,
mm,
yeah. This is her last nonfiction collection. Um,
yep.
oh wait, sorry, my brain is smooth. Um, is this a? I don't think it's. No, it wasn't. That was a fib. This description is wrong. I know a nonfiction collection that was published after this. Bad Storygraph. Um, okay. No one knows what's going on
What?
there. I'll use my own description because I've read some of this book. Um, this is a essay collection. It handles topics such as like the experience of menopause and how the different phases of life and how you're treated throughout them as a woman and how that shapes your experience on the world.
Mm,
Um, yeah. Um, and so I'm trying to find a description that's helpful, but none of them are. Um, I fear everyone's just kind of sitting there and being like, "Yeah, she's the goat," and not actually describing the book, which like I agree with. But yeah,
yeah,
so it's an
very
essay
valid.
collection. I thought it kind of connected to some of the themes and topics discussed on this perspective in the second half of the book, and might be interesting from that lens. I also just
Mm,
love Le Guin and want to talk about it. We've also not had an essay collection in a while. Um,
We
in
haven't.
in terms of themes, sexism is discussed. Sexism and misogyny is discussed throughout the book. Uh, there's also reference to things like pregnancy, fertility, menopause, and I believe there's references to like health issues and women's experience with not getting adequate access or response to symptoms of health issues, and I
Hmm,
can't describe that concisely, but that sort of lens that can be upsetting. Um, but yeah, I've not read all of this. It's a book that I have that I pick up and read every now and then, but it's just good, and I thought it might be interesting to read and talk about it.
I
Um,
agree. I really love Ursula K. Le Guin.
I was so close to nominating The Left Hand of Darkness as like the other classic book that's about gender. But I was just like, I feel like I don't know if it would fit more in the science fiction and fantasy book club because it is
I think
implicitly
maybe.
a science fiction book.
Yeah,
And um, so yeah, I was originally going to nominate The Left Hand of Darkness, but swapped it out for Dancing at the Edge of the World, which is also a great essay collection. Um,
it
but
is.
yeah. Um, do you have any remarks on this, or should we rumble over to A Short History of Nearly Everything by guess who? Bill Bryson.
um, no, I just that um, what's the word? Ursula K. Le Guin is always a win, and I love her essay collections. Also, Left Hand of
Yeah.
Darkness would be great, but like, yeah, I think it's more sci-fi. So next meeting, we can
Next
recommend the
meeting?
next one.
Yeah.
Next one. No, I just like it. Next one we have. Guess what? We have Bill Bryson, baby. I recommended more Bill Bryson. Again, I just like Bill Bryson, and I wanted to read some Bill Bryson. This is Bill Bryson's most popular work. Is A Short History of Nearly Everything. I would say, in which he, what's the word? It's like it's Bill Bryson talks about himself often as like somebody that is curious about the world around him. Often, he says he reluctantly travels because he um, wants to learn more about everything around him, from the Big Bang to civilization, how he got there, like everything. He is very much a very curious human being, and this is kind of that. It is a quest to understand everything that has happened in the universe, that has happened to us, from like the Big Bang, everything that you can think about. Um, and it is very, very good. I have read this one. It is really fantastic. Um, it is one of the longer nonfictions that we would be reading at almost 600 pages, but it is very, very good. For content warnings, because, and we did talk about it a lot, is there's a lot of like timeline that gets covered. We have stuff like alcoholism, animal cruelty. All of these are low, like proper, like low population of like ones. They're all one. So we will read this again. I will reread this because I haven't read it in a while, like a very long while, and let y'all know. But like for it, there is alcoholism, animal cruelty, animal death, body shaming, cancer, chronic illness, death, drug abuse, drug use, fat phobia, gun violence, homophobia, racial slurs, racism, slavery, transphobia, xenophobia, blood, anti-Semitism, cultural appropriation, colonization, classism, um, so it's obviously the ones that you will find throughout history. It is what human history has been for like the longest time. Um, but yeah, this author is phenomenal. This book is really, really good, and I do highly suggest it. Even if we don't pick it, I do highly, highly suggest this book for people that have not read this. Have you read this, Daniel? Do you have any comments?
I have not read this, but I have bought this as a gift for people. Not to just be like, if you need to ever get like a dad or an uncle a gift, this is a great book. but um,
It is good for that, I will say.
yeah, I've read little bits of it. I haven't read it all the way through actually. Um, okay.
Maybe you
If
should. Maybe this is your reason to read it.
maybe
Let's
this is
go.
the time for me to read it. Um, Going back to a book, meandering out to the next one then, if we are ready to
Yeah.
rumble, is one that came second a few months ago. I believe it came second in December, so it's been eligible again now. And I just kind of wanted to nominate it again, which is The Grasshopper Games Life in Utopia by Bernard Suisse. So this is a book about Aesop's grasshopper and the
Hmm.
necessity and philosophical value of play and the um, pitfalls of overvaluing productivity and contribution. So I'm gonna read a little description. But in the mid 20th century, philosopher Ludwig Wittgenstein famously asserted that games are indefinable, and there are no common threads to link them all. Nonsense, said sensible Bernard Suisse. Playing a game is a voluntary attempt to overcome unnecessary obstacles. The short book Suisse wrote demonstrates precisely that it is as playful as it is insightful, as stimulating as it is delightful. Through the jocular voice of Aesop's grasshopper, a shiftless but thoughtful practitioner of applied etymology, Suisse not only argues that games can be meaningfully defined, he also suggests that playing games is a central part of the ideal human existence, and so games belong at the heart of any vision of utopia. Um, I thought it's kind of fun. I like
Hmm.
suggesting books about philosophy. I normally end up doing so within the guise of them being science fiction and fantasy books that are about philosophy. But this is a book that is kind of dense in its address, but with it
Hmm.
being through the voice of a fable or a reinterpretation of a fable, is not overly serious and kind of stuffy in the way that a book of this kind of genre might be. And so yeah, it came second in the past, and so I thought maybe we nominate it again. The Will of the Many came second in the past, and it got picked for the last book club. So um,
Hmm.
this book doesn't have any publicly listed content warnings because it is a kind of niche book about philosophy and the necessity of play and social constructions. So if it gets picked,
Yeah, it's a bit
I'll read
niche.
it in the first like week or so, and then get back with any content warnings. Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I yeah. Do you got
Yeah,
any notes on
it
this one?
seems really interesting. It seems really
Yeah,
interesting. I kind of want to read it. It might go on my TBR.
but that suggests you have a singular TBR. Wow, ha 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 ha. Oh, hi Adam. How you doing?
I have a TBR I use now.
How many of your TBRs have been combined to sit in it?
0.
You started another one?
No, I just didn't combine any other ones into that one. I've been using Goodreads as my TBR for a while. I
You
just
have
didn't combine
multiple
anything
Goodreads
from the old one.
accounts.
I do, but like I haven't combined any of the other TBRs into this TBR, but I just use the one now. I don't use 7 anymore. I just use one. So
This
like
is
I just take a note in like Google Documents now. I just use the Goodreads one, but like the Goodreads one probably doesn't have everything from the others yet. So like I do need to.
yes, you do. This is what I mean when I said it was lies and slander when Kai said they would finish the year with their TBR being a lower number than me. Entirely untrue.
No, it's honestly might be true. I don't know how many are shared.
Last time you guesstimated, you said 700. So,
No, I know how long my TBR is. I
yeah.
know how long my TBR because I can look at all of the different sources, but I don't know how many of those. I don't know how many of them are like listed on multiple TBRs, and so only has to be listed once, right? So like, there could be like a series of books that's like 13 books that's on each one, but that I only count once, but
Wait,
I
when
count
you
for the
list a
6 months.
series, do you add all the books in the series?
Yes. I don't. Okay, so here's my thing with like series or like trilogies. If I start reading a trilogy, it's because I'm going to read the whole trilogy. I very rarely go into a book not wanting to read like a
Me being
trilogy.
very mad at Legendborn, unable to contribute to the conversation right now.
I I I I don't start things without the like the explicit implication that I will finish them. So like when I put like the first in a series on my TBR, I put the whole series on because in my mind I will read the whole series if I am engaging to read the first one. Um, it becomes really bad when you list out like big boy series like Malazan
Yeah,
or
I was
like
like
The
Malice
Wheel
and
of
the Wheel of
Time
Time. Like,
because of it. Where
um, I
yes, you're
swapped
still
from being on Ethernet to Wi-Fi back to Ethernet, and so I think if you refresh
ah
the browser, I return. Apologies. I fear this will
that's
hinder the participation in democracy. Um, okay.
I think so. Just
Uh,
play pause, play pause, click play pause.
I think you have to actually refresh the window and not just pause press, but maybe I Twitch be scuff.
Well, click play pause and it worked. Maybe I'm just
Oh,
special.
maybe.
Maybe I got lucky.
Okay.
I
Um,
am a mod, so maybe it's a mod thing.
I feel like it's more likely to be a device thing than a mod thing. Like,
True,
if you're in
true.
app versus on mobile or iPad versus on browser and computer.
That is true. I didn't think about that, but that is true.
Shall we meander over to Shakespeare? Boo, Bible blessing.
I knew that was coming. But yes, yes we can. So okay, so second again, Bill Bryson movie. I wanted to read some more Bill Bryson. Um,
If we don't pick a Bill
but
Bryson book this month, I'm gonna feel evil. Like,
yeah, there's three of them. It would be crazy. Um, but so I wanted to read more Bill Bryson, and I was looking through his like catalog of works, and I saw Shakespeare, and it's a Shakespeare biography about the life of Shakespeare, right? And I was like, I know Devin doesn't like Shakespeare, but like I do still want to talk about Shakespeare. I think it would be fun. I was like, this seems like the best way to do it to like ease us into Shakespeare. Like if I get us to read a biography of Shakespeare, next time I can get us to read like a play by Shakespeare. It's like an easing into Shakespeare. It's like a Trojan horse of Shakespeare.
I'll say,
Um,
I don't hate Shakespeare, I'm just fed up with Shakespeare. Shakespeare overplayed. Shakespeare. Anyway,
okay, fair, valid, valid. I can't dispute that. But so yeah, this is the Shakespeare Trojan horse. Tro- so this is about the life of Shakespeare. It's a biography about the the life of Shakespeare, written by Bill Bryson. Um, which it is really I've heard really good things about it, even though he is not a biography writer. I will say content warnings. Death is a big one. Spoiler alert: Shakespeare dies. Um, and other people around Shakespeare dies. Uh, there's a pandemic. That happens. Spoiler alert! Spoiler alert! The like 1800s had a very bad pandemic. Um, there's also like obviously in the time and in the zeitgeist and in Shakespeare's work you also see it. There's a lot of talk about like grief, violence, death of a parent. All of these things have been around him, and then sadly we have to talk about it because of the time. There is a lot of homophobia attached, um, as like it's not like a major theme in the book, but there is homophobia because of the time. It was not the most accepting time in history, not at all. So like, but those are the big ones that are like in the book as like content warnings is death, homophobia, and grief are the big three. Everything else is more minor, but like yeah, it is about Shakespeare and about that time. I don't know what much else to say other than like it's a biography about Shakespeare because like I don't think there's much more than it being a biography of Shakespeare. Shakespeare is very good, cool though. Yeah, I do know this talks about like not only just the life of Shakespeare that we know, but also about like the um myths around Shakespeare, like a lot of the like tall tales around Shakespeare, the superstitions, the academic discoveries, and all of these things about Shakespeare and the man that was Shakespeare.
I prefer the Centrinian's interpretation of Shakespeare.
But yeah, it seemed interesting. Also, Shakespeare is a cool person.
Maybe.
As a person, he was a very interesting person.
Mhm.
Even if you don't,
I
if you
like
think his work
I,
is overplayed.
I like I. I'm just grumpy. I'm just grumpy. I'm annoyed at AQA more than I am at Shakespeare, and one day I'll get over this. But
One day I'll get you to read a Shakespeare.
I
One day we'll read
I
much ado.
notably had to read several Shakespeare plays.
Yeah, but not with me, not in book club.
Yeah, one day you gotta convince the people to read Shakespeare. Okay. And our final nomination on Slate of My Internet is Becoming Human, with the full title Becoming Human, A Theory of Ontology by Michelle Tomasello. Um, wait, I'm dyslexic. I
Hmm?
can't tell if that's Michael or Michelle. I think that's Michael.
I
Um,
think it's Michael.
okay. Uh, Michael Tomasello. Sorry about that. Um, so this is a kind of philosophy psychology book. Um, I encountered it out in the wild when it was referenced in passing in a Religion for Breakfast video, which is a YouTube channel that talks about religion, and I thought it might be quite interesting. I looked it up, it seemed interesting. Thought it might be good for book club. So it doesn't have any like particular relation, but thought it might be quite interesting. Gonna read through the description,
Hmm.
which is a radical reconsideration of how we develop the qualities that make us human, based on decades of cutting-edge experimental work by the former director of the Max Planck Institution for Evolutionary Anthropology. Virtually all theories of how humans become such a distinct species focus on evolution. Here, Michael Tomasello proposes a complementary theory of human uniqueness focused on development, building on the seminal ideas of Voistoy. His data-driven model explains these ideas that make us human are constructed during the first years of a child's life. Tomasello assembles nearly 3 decades of experimental work with chimpanzees, bonobos, and human children to propose a new framework of psychological growth between birth and the 7 years of age. He identifies the 8 pathways that starkly differentiate humans from their closest primate relatives: social cognition, communication, cultural learning, cooperative thinking, collaboration, prosociality, social norms, and moral identity. In each of these, great apes possess rudimentary abilities, but then, Tomasello argues, the maturation of humans' evolved capacities for shared intentionality transforms these abilities through the new forms of sociocultural interactions they enable into uniquely human cognition and sociality. So, kind of a dense description. This is a book which I think it's going to be very interesting. I I I perhaps wonder if it might be too dense for book club, but it is kind of released as a book and not an informative text. But as you may have been
Hmm.
able to gather, it is kind of about the counterpart of what makes humans humans, but from the interpersonal level, focusing on the different levels of social engagement and internal recognition that differentiates that, and how ideas which are not primarily social but later facilitate social conversation. So, like the abstract idea of something that isn't directly in front of you and referring to it as like that's often called out as a relatively unique to humans property, and how that then later relates to social engagements and makes social behavior as we know as humans and as we deem like sentience. And I just think it's interesting. And it might be a
Hmm.
smidgen dense, but I thought it might be. We often end up discussing more so in the informative nonfiction aspect, and occasionally in like the science fiction fantasy aspect, a lot of things which push up against the ideas here. And so I thought this might
Yeah,
be fun. Um, yeah.
I agree. I I can see why you're scared it might be too dense, but I think it might not be. I actually really think it's a very interesting topic to cover about because yes, we do discuss a lot of things around this idea very often in book club.
Yeah.
Um,
I think honestly, it's just the blurb that's kind of intimidating. I hadn't read it all the way through, and I was just like, oh.
the blurb is kind of intimidating. The blurb is kind of
The
intimidating.
blurb
That's
continues
actually
for another 2 paragraphs, by the way. I gave you the blurb light.
the blurb. Yeah, the blurb is pretty intimidating. The blurb makes it sound way scarier than I think it might be, but the
Yeah,
blurb is
I
very
also.
scary.
um, but yeah, so I wanted to suggest this one because I thought it relates to things that crop up, so it'd be handy to have a more detailed understanding and like a common basis for understanding that this seems to be a good source of. Um,
It definitely does. I'm really interested. I'm really interested.
mhm. um, and so I, in the background, a genius that I am, have set up the first poll. So we now have
Oh
winning.
wait, I should have started it. I
Yeah.
should have started doing
Uh-huh.
this.
And the first poll, which contains The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson, Dancing at the Edge of the World by Ursula Le Guin, and A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. If you would like to vote for one of these, please do. The top vote for each of the 3 halves will be brought through to the finale, so we have part 1, part 2, and then finale. If the book you are most interested in the second half, still vote in the first half, because that way you get more say. Voting's good and fun. um, but yeah,
You
um,
know, you said it would be crazy if we don't read a Bill Bryson book. I think it would be crazy if the first. I just realized the first 3 are 2 Bill Bryson. If a Bill Bryson book doesn't win in the first 3, that would be insane.
it
It's
would,
got a
but it's up
2.
against Le Guin.
Yeah, but it's got a 2/3 lead. There's like 2 of them. Surely one of them wins. But it is liquid. It is liquid.
I fear it is Le Guin, and it is also the skewed audience of people watching the Mouse's Twitch channel who regularly goes on tirades about their love of Le Guin. Um,
Yeah,
but you know,
yeah, it's true.
I
It's
I think
true.
the mother tongue sounds very interesting. Um, because I've read aspects of or books that cover similar topics to A Short History of Nearly Everything. I think The Mother Tongue would be the Bill Bryson book that I'm most interested in. I think that's actually the one I'm going to vote for because I have.
Valid.
Oh, please don't. Which one are you voting for?
Oh, mother tongue.
Okay. I'm very glad it's not going to be a 3-way tie. Okay. And so it might look like a tie, but it's not because Kai's been building the second poll and can't vote whilst that's ongoing. So,
Yeah,
oh wait, a vote in the last minute. It looks like we have a tie between The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson and A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson. Uh, I got bamboozled there. Um, but yes, and
that
so
is
those will be
that
the.
is hilarious. What
It's
happens if
okay,
the
Le
final
Guin,
is
I
just
love you.
all Bill Bryson?
I'll sulk a little bit. Um, but you'll get what you want, I suppose. So, we
That's
now
not true.
have.
I like liquid.
Yeah, you did nominate 3 Bill Bryson books.
Yeah, I did. I did do that. I did.
I'm gonna take the reverse tech and nominate 3 Le Guin books next time. Um,
Okay, then I also nominate 3 Le Guin books, and we just have Le Guin books next time.
I'm done. Okay, and now for the second half of the poll. This one will be listing Shakespeare by Bill Bryson, Becoming Human, A Theory of Ontology by Michael Tomasello, and The Grasshopper, Games, Life, and Utopia by Bennett Sis. So if we
The whole part 2.
are ready to rumble, um, ooh,
This one is harder. Because
just in
now I
time
know
to
it's a
ruin
tie between
everything.
2
Was that
books.
you, Thunder? You bamboozled me. It's okay. I was expecting it to
Sorry.
be a draw and was trying to plan around the draw, and then you partook in democracy and it was no longer a draw. Um, I I am not intending to vote for Bill Bryson on this one, but I can't decide between The Grasshopper and Becoming Human because
I can't believe you.
On one hand, I am more interested, I think, in this moment in becoming human than the grasshopper, but because it's its second nomination, I don't think I'll personally nominate it a third time, so I feel like it's kind of its last chance. And so, but I do think becoming human is very interesting.
I actually have a different perspective. I think the grasshopper is the most interesting and the most likely to be renominated because, like, that's of all of these, that's the one that's going on my TBR. Like, even
Yeah.
if it doesn't win here,
I mean, this is its second nomination, is kind of the
that is true.
yeah.
Actually,
Oh,
I think I'm voting for it.
it looks like we're gonna get a
Yeah.
full part finale. Okay. You know what? Fair enough.
I guess. Wait, is this our first four-part finale?
I think so.
I
Quite
can't think of another
possibly.
time. I can't think of another time we had a four-way finale.
Okay, we have a minute left to go. I'm quite sleepy. I'm gonna have a caffeinated beverage. Brackets Dr. Pepper.
And she's gonna tell me to say the thing and be like, go vote. Democracy is good. Everybody should vote. Say should use their right to democracy right now
This is
and
true.
help us choose what we read for the next book club.
Oh, Hector! Thank you for the lead. Welcome in, leaders. You've arrived while we're participating in democracy. You have the option to participate very quickly. Would you like to read about philosophy and the necessity of leisure, Shakespeare, or the history and the development of the social features that led to humans? Please participate. Welcome in. Nothing like a high pressure raid environment. What were you up to, Toad? How did peak go?
Hi Todd.
Hello, Scully. Lit fiction Shakespeare. This is a like biography of Shakespeare rather than Shakespeare's work himself. Um, and
Yeah, this is not Shakespeare.
I have
It's
not made the
about Shakespeare.
finale, so it looks like we are now moving on to the finale. Would you like to describe all the books that are in there so I can type out?
Yeah, so we have in the first category, in the first poll that's moving on, we have The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson, which is about the English language, how it developed, and stories around its development and how it became our universal language. We also have A Short History of Nearly Everything by Bill Bryson, again, that is about like a short history about nearly everything that has happened in human history and society, and like just anything you can think of is like how did this thing in society develop. This is around that and about that idea, and just a very curious forward exploration of history. um we have The Grasshopper, Games, Lives, and Utopia by Bernard Sweets, which we talked about a bit ago, that Daniel talked about, which is about, my brain is
Do you
blanking
want me
down.
to hop in?
Failing. Yes,
um,
do
it's
grasshopper,
a
do grasshopper.
retelling of Aesop's tale from the perspective of the grasshopper, discussing the necessity of games as a part of leisure and play, and its necessity in any utopia, and reframing it of utopia within that lens. But not too stuffy because it's a grasshopper narrating. Um,
Yeah. Then you had it practiced. That's why then you take it over. Then you're better at it.
do
Then
you
you're
want me
so
to
good
do
at it.
Becoming Human as well?
Yes, do Becoming Human.
Okay,
Do
Becoming
Becoming Human.
Human, the last nominated book, is, or the last book that's made it into the finale, is Full Title: A Theory of Ontology by Michael Tomasello, is a book about the history of, well, the features that lead to the distinct social behaviors within humans that we think of as making us distinct from other animals, and the key foundations and principles that can be separated out that make up this distinction, and discusses a little bit of how they can be seen or not seen individually in bonobos and chimpanzees compared to humans, and how that makes up our social complexity that makes sentience in humanity. Um, and yeah, those are our top four. So the finale will be starting now. If you would like to participate, we have a poll. Ooh, democracy, clicking buttons. things people enjoy, I hope. Yeah. I don't know what to pick.
I don't either.
I
Good
hmm,
thing there's a 50-50 chance it's a Bill Bryson book.
there's a 50-50 chance it's a Bill Bryson book.
Ignore the fact that 50% of the nominations this week was Bill Bryson.
Ignore. So you've essentially rigged a situation where Bill Bryson is guaranteed to have the lowest win rate possible this month.
Yes. Even if he wins, he has the lowest win rate.
Yeah. Well, no, because then everyone else would have 0%.
Wait, true. I didn't think about that part.
But anyway, I'm conflicted. I think of the Bill Bryson books, I've said this before. I think I'm more interested in the mother tongue, but but I I feel like I should embrace the spirit and vote Bill Bryson. But I also I don't know. I think the two books I nominated that got through are
Propaganda.
quite interesting as well.
Propaganda.
Um,
Yes, the propaganda.
uh,
Embrace Bill Bryson.
for me, I'm tied between the mother tongue and becoming human because although I love the
Hmm.
grasshopper, I know it is harder to get hold of than becoming human. Becoming human has like
Hmm.
an audiobook and is still like when I recommend random psychology books, they don't always have mass printings. So this one's like it's pretty accessible. That's kind of cool. Um, oh,
It
I
is
ca
definitely the harder of them to get like a hold of is the grasshopper.
I'm still grumpy when I ordered a nice copy of the grasshopper and then it got lost in the mail and I've not been able to find that printing since. Um,
Pain.
boo. Indeed. I was like, can you send me another
Oh.
copy? And they were like, no, that was the last one. um, but yes, I, I, I feel very mean on voting for Bill Bryson. I'll vote for the mother tongue. I'm a good friend. I.
You don't have to.
Well, you nominated 3 Bill Bryson books out of 3. I feel like that's.
I also was in the mood for some Bill Bryson. I saw like interview thing with Bill Bryson. I was like, I want to read some Bill Bryson. I don't know. I will say I do want to read the Grasshopper and Becoming Human too. I
Yeah.
really really do want to read the Grasshopper.
I'm glad people are interested in becoming human. I might re-recommend that again at some point in the future. But it looks like jumping ahead at the end, The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson has won. So that will be our next book club. Now we have the instance where it turns out months don't cleanly fall into 4 weeks, and so our next book club is gonna just be inside. Um, it's going to technically be 5 weeks rather than 4 because
Yeah,
it would either be 2 book clubs inside May or a 5 week, and I decided on 5 week. I It's not
yeah.
perfect. Calendars be calendaring. But yes, we'll be continuing the Chaos meeting on Saturday, the 6th of June at 7 p.m. GMT, where we'll be reading and reviewing The Mother Tongue by Bill Bryson. In the meantime, we have another book on the go, but it isn't that one. It is The Will of the Many by James Islington, which I managed to update it the day for being Saturday the 16th of May, but I got the book wrong. So I'm gonna just move you to obscure that. I
I guess
forgot
I'm
to
here
update
now.
the slides, and so pay no attention to
I
this
live
part of
here
the
now.
screen. It's not factually up to date. Um, that was smooth. Like no one saw. But yes,
We're here now. You saw nothing.
you saw nothing. Thank you for stopping by, Toad. But I fear the raid has occurred towards the end of the stream, so I hope everyone has enjoyed discussion of Orlando or impassioned participation in democracy. Do love a good participation in democracy. Um, oh, and if
Hmm.
there is any like further Orlando shenanigans you'd like to chat about, I am inclined to do some kind of more closer reading discussion of Orlando in the future, because we kind of didn't get
Same.
into the prose of it. We just went, oh, and then and then read some of our
So
favorite sections
pretty.
out. But yes, so if we will be reading over to Lena, who I believe is like doing craft building, a very cool dragon. So
She is.
if I get the raid messages, one stream, one book club, I will correctly change all of the things in the slides. Um,
Yeah. Well, then we will get there.
Look, I'm doing a lot of book club shenanigans behind the
You
scenes.
are.
I'm
You know.
organizing
You
a
know.
lot of things.
Okay, okay. I have to run that statement back. I have to say I'm sorry. I literally do none of the background for book club. I show up and talk about books and be happy. I am sorry, Denya. Nobody look at me. That was mean. I shouldn't have said it. Denya does so much more work for book club than I ever do. I just show up and look pretty and then talk about books.
I do all the admin, and then Kai gets him in Shakespeare posts. Um,
I have to say sorry. I apologize, Danya. I will never do it again.
I don't believe you. I don't believe you. But anyway, thank you so much for being here. I think I will be continuing with the impromptu schedule stream shenanigans for a little bit further, with weekday streams starting at 8 p.m. But there'll be 2 to 3 streams next week. So keep an eye out. Apologies, we're not quite up to the scheduling shenanigans, and I will see you then. Let's go say hi to Lena. Nice dragon building things. Sometimes talks about books too. Lena's a delight. Everyone's a kiss. Bye bye. Bye bye.